Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 482 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again after a very successful Sunday fundraiser night.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. But I have to congratulate the entirety of the LSA for somehow getting the Razom for Ukraine fundraiser run just this past Sunday up to $10,611. We don't know where that happened because I think we rounded out the stream and it was around $7.8 thousand or somewhere similar. And somehow it went all the way up to 10.6. We have no idea how. We have no idea why. But I do want to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for helping out Razom and helping out Ukraine. It's great to know that through so many fundraisers, we've run so many of them. YouTube only allows us to have 50 active of them now. It is unbelievable to think that we've been able to not just meet the fundraiser goals, but go well over them. And I have to thank you all so much once again for making that possible for this channel and the entirety of the LSA to save as many lives as we possibly can through amazing fundraisers like Razom. Speaking of amazing things happening, the Ukrainians have been engaging in heavy fighting on the major highways leading from Kharkiv and Lobkove down towards the area of TOKMAK. And it's even supposed that Ukrainian forces, and of course, this is only rumors at the moment, and we cannot confirm this because we have heard rumors like this before from Russian propagandists, but it is supposed that Ukrainian forces are making it to their way towards Vasilivka right now. We, of course, don't know if that's true at the moment because, like I said, this is coming from Russian propagandists, and even in the past, during this counteroffensive, Russian propagandists had stated that Ukrainian forces had made it all the way to Poloki, although they have not yet. So we're going to be giving those statements this time a little bit of a wider, I guess you could say, breadth than normal, like we used to be, because it seems even in Russian defeat, Russian propagandists lie a large deal about what's actually going on. So we're not going to be getting into that specific detail, but we can go into what we've seen today and what we have been able to confirm through Deep State's map and also from video and picture evidence. Over the past 48 hours, Ukrainian forces have been engaging in heavy offensive actions down the highway from Kharkiv. This highway, if we can get a name for it, is the T0408 highway. It appears that they've been trying to push down that highway, and they've also been pushing down the highway from Lobkove, which is the T0812, and it appears that they are either trying to move further south and towards Tokmak or towards Vasilivka. The exact direction of movement in this area is currently unknown. They are moving directly south at the moment, and were able to liberate another village 48 hours ago just south of Lobkove, and the name of that village is Piatikati. That's going to be very hard for me to pronounce, so we're just going to call that the village south of Lobkove from here forward, because I'm going to butcher that every single time. But it is absolutely amazing to know that the Ukrainians are continuing their fighting in this area, and it is proving to whittle down Russian forces at an incredibly high rate. We've seen one of the highest casualty numbers of the war for the Russian army today, and not only that, we actually got some picture proof showing that some units in the area are practically non-existent at this point. And so we're going to be showing you all that little picture right here, right now. This, if I can find it, here we go. I don't know why it's a truck. Let me change that to a soldier, because that's what the actual marker's about. A unit from South Ossetia, some of y'all may know, was brought forward by the Russians and into the southern area of Ukraine, specifically the area around Lobkove and Vasilivka. The country of South Ossetia is a internationally non-recognized country within the nation of Georgia. Its borders actually lie within this little dotted line area here, and that is the country of South Ossetia. It's been a Russian puppet, along with West Abkhazan over here on the very western tip of Georgia, ever since the invasion in 2009 by the Russian Federation that ended up securing these fake countries within the nation of Georgia. To this day, they have been puppets, and even during this war, they have raised forces from inside of South Ossetia and West Abkhazan to send into Ukraine to be used alongside the Russian army. And one of those units is the supposed elite Storm unit of South Ossetia, which has been in the area of the southern front around Vasilivka and Lobkove for a little bit of a while. We can see that apparently this grinding offensive by the Ukrainians has been causing a decent amount of damage to the Storm unit. We actually got a before and after picture, kind of like a weight loss, of the Storm unit when they entered the war, and here's a picture of them, and I believe, according to this, there were around 300 soldiers entirely within the Storm unit, so it's about half the size of a battalion tactical group. We can see the flag of South Ossetia right there and the flag of the Russian Federation right there, and this is the picture that they took when they moved into the area, so they hadn't engaged Ukrainian forces yet. This is the picture they took just a few days ago. There are only 20 of them left. That means that
What do you know?
Yeah, what do you know? I mean, like this, Ukrainians are great for trimming down Russian forces. They went from around 300 soldiers to nearly 20. So we know that nearly 280 of them have been wounded or killed so far over the counteroffensive, and there's hardly anything left of the storm unit from South Ossetia. And this is giving us a fairly good gauge that if they are doing poorly, other Russian units on the lines must be getting ground down as well at a fairly fast pace. These guys won't be missed. We, of course, heard the reports and rumors of war crimes they've been committing behind the lines in the area, so they will not be missed whatsoever, like the rest of the Russian army that has also gone the way of the dirt. None of them will really be missed. But one thing interesting that we did see as well is we also got to see a little bit of a casualty report. Let me make sure I find this one. And we'll get to this right here real quick. This is, wait, hang on. Did I move that to a different area? Let me go and make sure. Moving on through the south, combat drone, M2 Bradley in action. I didn't move the casualty. Okay, here we go. We're going to move this over here because this is actually around the Irikov area, and usually we put the markers way off, but in the purposes of talking about how heavy the fighting and how high the losses have been of the Russian forces, we're actually going to take this marker that I put around Wheelpole, and we're going to move it towards Irikov, where most of the heavy fighting is occurring right now. Ukrainian forces were able to get a hold of a Russian I guess you could say units roster is the best way to explain this document, and it appears that it's actually talking about the losses of the Russian forces within this brigade. And according to this, documents from the 136th Brigade of the Russian Federation shows 55 wounded and 68 dead in the Zaporizhia front. And if we look at these documents and we try and zoom in here, we can see that they marked 55 of them right there as cargo 300, and we can see that hardly, and then we can see 68 of them are dead. And so quite an unfortunate thing for this brigade. It appears that it is taking losses of a pretty decent amount just over the past week, and they probably will not be faring that well going forward. Unfortunately, I can't read the rest of this graph here, and also the graphics quality on this picture is quite low, but it is giving us a really good idea that Russian forces are being whittled down in this area, and that they're faring quite poorly, at least in terms of retaining their force size that they had once they were going into the offensive. In other words, like General Schwarzkopf would have called it in the Gulf War, these units are being attrited to a very high rate over a very short amount of time. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little picture right there showing a casualty report from the 136th Brigade of the Russian Federation. Doesn't look like they're doing all too well. And now we're going to be moving on into some of the videos we saw of Ukrainian forces fighting in the direction of Lipkove and the village south of Lipkove. Starting off with our first clip from the other day showing the liberation of the village south of Lipkove. We can see the UR-77 Meteorite firing its mine-clearing charge. And we can see it clearing a minefield right there. And now we can hear the epic music coming in as we see some positions of the Russian forces right there. We can now see Ukrainian artillery being brought in onto the village. And also to give us an idea of where we're looking at here on the drone camera, let's go to Google Maps and let's take a look at exactly where that is in that village. So if we look at this village here, we can see the building right here that you can see at the very bottom of the frame right there. And so it appears that this drone is actually over this little facility here, this abandoned facility, and it's looking over the far western side of the village. From what we understand, this village also sits on a ridgeline overlooking Lipkove, and so Ukrainian forces had to take the difficult task of advancing uphill towards the village south of Lipkove to be able to take it. When you see the artillery coming down on the village, inflicting a pretty decent amount of damage onto Russian positions, and we can also see that the Russians placed a trench line here looking over the southern ridge. And this may be the reason why Ukrainian advances are having a little bit more of a difficult time in this area than we've seen in other counteroffensives, is that they are having to fight over hilly terrain, and the hills in this area aren't going north to south where they're trying to push down a valley directly in a straight line. They're pretty much having to move over the hill and then back down the hill on the other side and then back up another one, because the ridge lines in this area actually move from east to west for the most part instead of north to south like we've seen in other parts of the front line. We can see two Russian vehicles here. It appears that there's an APC and a main battle tank right here trying to move around. We can now see a column of Russian APCs and tanks in the distance, and we now see Ukrainian Stugna being brought in to take care of some of these vehicles. We can see the first one in the column was hit heading into the village, and we can see the remainder of the column appears to be stationary, and they're continuing to be hit by Stugna fire as well. We can now see a Ukrainian tank moving down the area. We can also see a Ukrainian squad moving into the tree lines near to this Ukrainian T-80. And we can now see a drone flying in. And that, I don't know what that was, actually. We know that that was a Ukrainian drone. Okay, so here's what we got. These are two Russian BMP-3s. One of them broke down, and the one in the lead is pulling the broken down one out of the battlefield. So, in a sense, killing the first BMP and setting it on fire pretty much ensures that the second one will never be recovered either, because there's no real way to get it back out of there, considering that there's not an operational APC in the area. We can now see that drone coming down on the very rear of that BMP, taking it out. And we can now see what appears to be some kind of a BTR smoking in a field near the area of the village. We can also see another BTR firing over here, and we can now see another Ukrainian kamikaze drone coming in on what appeared to be a T-62, maybe.
That's an old boy right there.
That's an old boy right there. And we can now see some Ukrainian, well, not Ukrainian, Russian units moving around a little bit further to the other side of the village. We'll actually try and find this because there's a little silo right there, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. And it appears that this would actually be, wait a minute, here we go, we found it. This is the Russian forces down in this area, and if we go back here and we try and take a better look at where exactly this drone camera is looking, it's looking to where there's this little stable area over here. So we're actually looking, now the drone has moved up to around here where the mouse cursor is, and it's looking down into the village of Zebryanki, south of the village, south of Lobkove, and so now we know, based off of this, the Ukrainian forces are certainly moving past this village and on into the next one further down the road and heading towards Vasilivka, and we can see Russian forces appearing to withdraw from this village and coming under fire at the same time. We can now see that APC has caught on fire. Set it alight! We can now see two more Russian vehicles once again out on a road. We can now see a Russian BMP-3 racing forward in the village, and really quickly I'll show y'all where that was. That APC, that BMP, was actually seen driving down this road in the eastern direction, heading past these silos. We can see the silos on the very edge of the screen, which I'll show here again. Let me do that real quick. And we can see the silos over there. We can see the APC coming down the road. Wait a minute, hang on. Let me make sure that's the correct direction, because these silos are actually long ways. Hang on, correction. It's actually coming down this road. It's heading north and most likely going to start turning east to try and move forward to where it can try and hit Ukrainian forces. It appears to have not been successful, as the FPV drone hit the BMP-3 near to the front of the upper hull, which we can see right there, and regardless whether it actually hit the lower glacis of the upper hull or the upper part, it most likely caused the engine to explode, or it caught the ammunition on fire that's inside of that BMP. We can now see the Ukrainian forces standing on the flag of the storm unit and raising their flags outside the village south of Lobkove, confirming that they were able to take it. The raising of these flags inside of the village south of Lobkove happened around 48 hours ago, and so this isn't really violating OPSEC to get into incredibly high detail on what happened during this battle, as most of this is now 2 days old. And with that, that's the end of that video clip right there, but amazing to see that they were able to push forward into the area, and it appears that they're making some pretty good progress heading down the T0812. Progress has been slow, and that is something that nobody can really skirt around at this point, is that the Ukrainian offensive is going slower than expected. However, they are still making advances, and they are dealing with heavily fortified Russian defense positions even before they're making it to the Maginot Line that is just north of TOKMAK. And so it will probably take a continued amount of time for them to be able to push forward and secure good positions or to start routing Russian forces in full, but we do know that the Russians are starting to lose their forces at a little bit of a faster rate at this point. Speaking of which, we also saw a Ukrainian Bradley crew, we're assuming that this was in the area of Lobkove, raising a flag over their BMP, getting ready to move forward. We've also never seen a camo layout much like this one on a Bradley before.
Man, that's kind of like a real repetitive looking camo. It's kind of cool though.
Yeah, I think they had like one kind of print design here. Well, maybe 2 of them, because you can see that
And they stamped it on over and over and over.
yeah, so yeah, see, like it's the same shape over and over and over. And these down here are the same shape, but they kind of like spun it around if they needed it upside down or right side up. And they also did that on the turret as well. So this appears to be a pretty unique camo job, really because they didn't have anything but 2 stencils to work with. But we can see them raising the Ukrainian flag on top of this Bradley.
You know, honestly, with today's technology, they probably don't really need to focus on the camo that much. It's good to have something, but it's not really majorly important anymore.
Yeah, it's not really as important as it used to be, considering that there's infrared around, but then again, the Russians don't really have infrared. So it is kind of important when you're going up against the Russians, but for the Russians, it doesn't matter, because everyone they're going up against, including the Ukrainians, has infrared at this point at a fairly good number. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, where we also saw a kamikaze drone hitting Russians in the area of Lobkove and, let me make sure I get this correct, Zarabianki. And so here's the clip. And also, we're going to mute the Chad music, but we can see it running into an MTLB sideways right there. Ooh. That didn't end well. That didn't end well for that guy. Eek. But with that, that's the end of that little bit of footage right there, and I'd have to say that he's probably not doing that well, and he probably has a sore rump. But moving on from that and into our next little bit of news, we also saw some Russian units being destroyed, and this wasn't really given in a good direction. This was only described as the Tavria direction, which is a little bit further south than where we even put this marker. It's right here. And we know that Ukrainian forces have not advanced that far at this moment, because that's actually within the Maginot line down there. So we just put the marker kind of in this area. It's most likely related to the fighting in Lobkove and Zarabianki, but then again, the marker's description was less than adequate. We can see here the Russian APCs toasting. We can see that one actually exploding right there. And let me see real quick, because that was actually a pretty landmark building there. Let's go to Tavria, and let's see if that is a building within that village. So let's see. Here's Tavria. And so let's take a look at that building again. So we have a small building here. We have an intersection and what appears to be some kind of a lake. And there is no lake around Tavria. So it does appear that this... Wait a minute. Hold on. We got a lake here. But it doesn't appear we have an intersection in a similar building. Wait a minute. Nah, that couldn't be it. Yeah, sadly, that marker and the location around Tavria is most likely inaccurate, but it did happen somewhere within this part of the front line. We can see a BMP-1 right there of the Russian army toasting. We can see another one burned out. I would say that is congratulations on a cooked scale. We can now see them dropping a bomblet on top of another Russian BMP, and we can now see a MTLB and a BMP-1 destroyed on a roadway near the area. We can also see another BMP, once again exploding in the same area seen earlier on film, and we can now see a bomblet setting the fuel tank on fire inside of that BMP-1. We can also see... Oh my god! Oh my god! I thought that was going to be like a mundane thing, like, pooh, but no, that thing just went nuclear.
I wonder if they rigged that one up with a ton of explosives like the Russians have started doing.
I don't know, Matthew, but one thing I was thinking when I saw that, Mr. Oppenheimer, they have perfected the bomb. Oh my god. That is...
The director said, I want them to feel the explosion.
I want them to be able to experience the explosion. Michael Bay, is that you? But anyway, so that's the end of that clip right there. But we can see that the Ukrainians have been inflicting a large amount of vehicular damage, at least in this direction, on the southern front. And hopefully they'll be able to continue to advance with the same kind of rapidity and speed in this area, because it is showing that they are making progress. It's not the kind of lightning-fast progress we saw in Balaklia or in Kherson, but the Ukrainians are still trying their best to methodically go about destroying these Russian emplacements while taking minimal losses. And the minimal losses part is probably the reason why their offensives are being slowed a little bit, because if a Leopard 2 moves forward and it gets missed or it gets hit by a Stugna, that Leopard 2 now has to withdraw from the line, the infantry does not get any armor support, and then they have to find a way to deal with those ATGMs before the armor can come back up and support the infantry in their advance. And so that is probably the reason why, just one of the examples why, we're not seeing Ukrainian advances as fast as we saw in other areas. And this area was heavily fortified long before this offensive even began. But moving on from that and on into the Irkutsk direction, we've also heard similar stories heading down the T-0408 highway of Ukrainian advances and them trying to make progress there. And we saw, of course, the casualty report from that area of the line, and these two videos are supposed to be in the Arikov area. Of course, not particularly accurate, and we did put them in the middle of the woods so that we wouldn't possibly be throwing it down on exactly where those forces are. But starting off with our first clip, we saw another Leopard 2A4 moving on through the south. Here's the clip. And look at it go. And it has a horn.
Well, what in the world was that?
I never knew that these things had horns.
Roadrunner.
Man, do you imagine the Russian sitting there inside of a house, and this Leopard 2 has its engine off, and he just hears beep, 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 and he goes, Roadrunner, and he goes running outside, and it's just a Leopard 2 right outside the building. It's like, that wouldn't end well for him. We gotta hear, wait a minute. There's no way in hell that the Leopard 2A4 has a horn. Let me pull that up. Do Leopard tanks have horns? The Leopard 1 has a horn.
I'm not really sure why. It says for backing up in a non-tactical environment.
What the hell?
Huh.
They just have...
You can't hear the tank roaring?
Apparently not. Apparently they're just expecting on people to be like deaf to the tank's roar of the engine or something. I didn't know that these things actually had horns. I thought that was just something you didn't have on tanks, because usually if they're ever moving down a road, they usually have some kind of a lead vehicle in front of them. You know, like with the Americans, it's usually like a Humvee or something with one of those little orange traffic lights on it or something. I've never heard of a tank having horn. That's news to me, and that was pretty shocking to hear. But anyways, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into the next one, where we also saw a Ukrainian combat drone in action in this area. This one was actually a video that was put forward by Civdiv, who has been a prolific Ukrainian war YouTuber over the course of the entire war. We've actually shown a decent amount of some of Civdiv's clips here on our channel because they are pretty high quality, and we've never really seen a lot of these clips elsewhere. But we can see the drone dropping an F1 grenade down into a Russian position. We can see this guy waddling away from the drone, and it appears that he tripped and fell in the field. This is supposedly in the area of Arikov, but we're not exactly sure on this marker, but it's in the general location. We can see the drone dropping bomblets onto Russian forces, and it appears that it's trying to hit some kind of an outpost or a bunker that's in that trench line right there. We now see it flying in again. Very weird dirt over here. I've never really seen dirt like that before, but, you know, there's always room for
What in the world? That guy got out there just in time.
He did. And so now he's kind of hanging out as the drones continue to drop bomblets.
Talking about cheap drones dropping grenades.
And now he's going to try...
They were cheap.
Man, I'm telling you, these drones are not cheap. Us having to get one, they're like $2,000. And if that's cheap, then everything's cheap. Notice the Russian army has given him no support against these threats, and his only chance is to lay still under half a bunker. And we can see the drone trying to line up the bomblet. This constant drone surveillance and attack limit the enemy's chance to work on their own position. Drones have been used for decades for this very reason. We now see them dropping another F1 grenade, that one landing in a pretty nice spot, and it appears to have been quite effective. We now see the Russian kind of stumbling out of this half bunker. The sole surviving invader decides to make a run for it. Obviously, he's a little shaken up by the frag.
He actually is not in his right state of mind or something. He might be drunk.
Maybe. Maybe. I'm not doubting that. And Kolchak said, that is cheap for military gear. Yes, it is cheap for military gear, certainly. But for someone like me trying to get a drone for the guys over there, it's pretty expensive. I'm not going to lie. And we can see him stumbling.
Oh, this guy's drunk for sure. Like, he's not acting right. He's dropping his gun. Oh, this guy's definitely, he's sauced.
And yeah, he's just wandering on. He's sitting there singing one of those songs, you know. And he sees the drone. He's like, oh, bliet. Obviously concussed, he holds his hand up to hear for the drone, and then runs off to find a different hole. And we now see him running off again, trying to find a new place to hide, and it appears that there is a freshly destroyed T-72B3 out here that he can hide under.
Oh, Bliat, I wonder if there's some vodka in this tank. Or there must be some vodka down the trench somewhere.
Man, the gasoline, man, it hits just right. And we get
Oh,
the
I'll
panic
take
sets.
anything. Ethanol, alcohol, anything.
Man, I'll even take wood alcohol, Bliat. Just give me something. The panic sets in as the drones continue their work. The Russians are given nothing to defend against the drones with. And we can clearly see, because all of them act like they don't have a clue. We now see this guy continuing to run through the trench. He ran into a log right there. He has a radio on him. A whole Russian position nullified with some Chinese drones. We can see him continuing to limp forward. And now he's clear out of the trenches, and he's just in the wide open. And we can even see a lot of the crater marks around this trench from shelling. From what we know, if he returns to the rear, he'll probably be reprehended or for retreating without orders and sent back to the front. A simpler and safer measure would be to contact the I Want to Live hotline and surrender himself. Of course, we know the Russians rarely ever do that because they don't have any sense. We can also see him moving by a stricken BMP-2 right there that has clearly been destroyed for maybe several weeks at this point. Artillery is effective, but drones buzzing above you and being able to achieve precision strikes against you is terrifying. This is probably more effective than snipers, honestly, because you can get a larger amount of drones in a shorter amount of time, and they are about as effective as instilling fear and also inflicting enemy casualties as just about any other kind of sniper would be able to.
Also, I see a ton of folks saying these guys might be actually shell-shocked instead of drunk, and it could be. I'm not exactly sure how it looks when somebody is shell-shocked, but to me they look drunk.
They could be drunk, concussed, shell-shocked.
Could be both.
It could be a mixture of everything, really, because knowing the Russians, they are, and this is something we can't deny, the Russians have a problem as a nation with alcoholism, and we have seen that has been a constant problem for the Russians on the front lines. And so it could be the case that this guy was sloshed, and then now he's shell-shocked on top of being sloshed, and he's trying to figure out how to get out of here with both of those things working against him. My friend eliminated 3 of these invaders during this operation, which included the BMP he previously took out on my channel and the team of Spetsnaz. You can only imagine the damage the Russian military is taking overall as the drone pans over the destroyed tree line in the emptied out trench. As always, the members of this channel and those who've donated to TDI or my friend's PayPal deserve my gratitude. Together we will show the true reality of war and support those fighting the invaders. My friends are incredibly thankful for your kind words of support as they all recover from battlefield wounds. Unblurred footage available to all Tier 2 members. Slav Ukraini. And of course that's a message from Sivdiv's channel to his viewers who support his channel to help him keep running. And I've got to respect them because they are helping that fellow to be able to keep this channel running. And so huge respect to him. But with that, that's the end of the clip as that guy trips over the tree log again. And with that, we can see that from what we can tell in the Arikov area, things are going about as good as they are near the Lipkove direction. We didn't really get a lot of video footage or film of the Russian forces or the Ukrainian forces fighting in the area of Arikov today, but from what we've been able to hear is making about the same kind of progress that the Ukrainian offensive in Lipkove is making on top of that. We're now going to be moving on to parts of the front line where we have not been able to tell that any frontline progress has been made in the southern front, but heavy fighting still persists. Moving on into the Wheelopole area, where we saw an M2 Bradley in action. Here we can see the M2 Bradley moving up and firing its 30mm. I'm sorry, 25mm, sorry. 30mm is the gun that you'll find on a BMP-2. We can see that they hit something that exploded. Yeah, they hit the big daddy firework blade. And we can see them moving on up down the street.
These are some really deep tracks on this road.
Yeah, this road has been well traveled. We can see them continuing to fire. And also, by the way, to clarify, they're not launching fireworks here. These are actually the 25mm high explosive shells of the Bushmaster 25mm. So they're not hitting an ammo storage every single time. That's just what the high explosive looks like. And I gotta say, it really just does look like Roman candles. And we can see they're just conducting a drive-by shooting here on this trench line. Russians completely amiss to really stop this. You see the Bradley continuing to drive on, and we can see something in the distance. We can't tell what vehicle that was, but it did just fire a missile.
Damn, they're letting loose.
Man, they are lighting this place up. We're not really sure if they can tell where Russian targets are. It appears they may just be firing into the tree line to keep Russian soldiers' heads down or just to inflict a lucky casualty. And once again, we can't tell what vehicle that is in front of them due to the poor video quality. It may be another M2 Bradley, or it may be another vehicle entirely. Bradley just laying every Russian low in that tree line if there are Russians in there.
Someone said, I hope the wildlife got out. Man, the deer and Bambi's probably thinking, what the hell's going on?
Man, this is like that wildfire scene in Bambi. Man, that was actually a hardcore scene when you think about it. But anyways,
that was tough.
Yeah, that was tough, honestly. We now see them firing with the coaxial right there. I believe they're coaxial on the Bradley's M240. We now hear the Bradley's engine spooling up as the M2 begins to roll on forward. We could see something happen up there with the lead vehicle, but we couldn't really tell what that was. We now see the coaxial still laying down the fire into the tree line, and it appears that they're just trying to blanket the entire area still. Machine gun is still laying down fire, and it appears that the gunner may be trying to find more targets for the 25mm.
Has anything fired back yet from the tree line?
It doesn't seem so, and I'm thinking that they may or may not know if there are or are not Russian forces in that tree line, and they're just laying down suppressive fire, not really knowing where the Russians are, but if they are in there, it'll keep their heads down. Now see the turret slewing to the right into the open field. We see him looking out there. Appears that nothing was out there, so they immediately return back to the left side. The machine gun continues to fire. We have not seen any infantry dismount from this Bradley either. It appears that it may have not moved into the battlefield with the infantry. Machine gun is now laying down heavier bursts in the direction of the tree line over there. We're not really sure if they're able to see anything. Once again, the footage quality is a little low. Now we can hear some rifle fire.
Survive in there.
I don't think anything would survive, and we are starting to hear a rifle fire, finally. I've finally clearly heard some small arms, and so it does appear that they may be receiving return fire now from the trenches, from Russians with AKs, and I don't think that's going to do much against Bradleys, but they're trying nonetheless. I guess it's the thought that counts in the Russians' mindset. And we hear some more small arms fire, and we see the turret slewing around, trying to find more targets. Now hear an explosion in the distance, couldn't really tell what it was from. And we now see the footage is cut forward. The Bradley is now turning its turret back towards the front. And we can now see them lighting up the tree line again with a 25mm main gun.
One thing I'm noticing about this video is, like Guitar Gems pointed out, I think stopping is a bad thing. I would be very concerned if the Russians had an RPG or something in that tree line, but this thing would be like a fish in a barrel at this point.
It would be, actually, and I'm not really sure if they have any information to know whether these guys have AT or not. They haven't used any, and now we can see that this Bradley did unload infantry. We just never saw it on film. They unloaded, and they shifted over to the right side of the Bradley, hiding behind it for most of the firefight, and now they've moved forward in front of the Bradley. You see the Bradley really laying it heavy on that one specific part of the tree line, maybe showing that there are Russian forces there. When you still hear small arms fire being exchanged, I mean, you see the Ukrainian group of infantry here, the squad that's dismounted from that Bradley, sitting there on the right side of the road. We can also hear an explosion further down the line. But with that's seen in the clip, and once again showing a little bit of the fighting going on in the area of Huilopol. But once again, we don't know the exact location, it's just in the general Huilopol area, and it does appear that the Bradleys are advancing forward and engaging Russian forces, but we haven't seen any physical frontline changes as of today. This may have been a harassing action or a probing action, and then this column retreated from the lines, and there was no real frontline change to be had from this engagement. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip, where we saw a pretty solid hit by a Ukrainian FPV drone in the Huilopol direction. Have you ever wanted to get yourself... That's what Have you ever wanted to find yourself an entire Russian unit to blow to smithereens? Well, you're about to find one right here. Introducing the all-new BTR-82. It's like one of those Japanese sushi places you go to eat at where the plates are brought right to you on a conveyor belt. Tons of Russian soldiers riding on top of this thing, ready to be taken out by an FPV drone at any moment. Make sure to get yours today. Guts, glory, graves, Russian Federation, join it today or something. But we can now see the we can now see the FPV drone coming on down the road. This is actually what we saw there a second ago. I believe that may have been after footage of after the BTR was hit, and we can now see the FPV drone coming on in. And of course, as usual, you see the usual message on the interface saying "land now." And oh, buddy, if only the programmers knew, they were really about to land this thing for the last time. We can see the BTR booking it down the road, throwing up a smoke trail, making it pretty easy to find the thing. The FPV drone is now coming on in, and let's take a look real quick. It appears that it may be a BTR-60, and it's got about 8 guys probably on top of that thing, and who knows how many more inside of the BTR. And
oh man!
Oh,
you know, like the top of the screen says Toro, Toro.
Totoro. But oh my god, that did not end well for them. We can see it hitting right there, and I think we'll probably get some additional footage here in a second, actually showing a third-person view of that drone hitting the BTR. And we can see it pause right there, and it looks like it collided with the open, oh my god, it's the open driver's hatch. So we know that the driver did not make it out of this okay, because most of the shrapnel was directed straight downwards and into the open hatch. So that didn't end well for the driver. And now we can see the footage of the FPV drone hitting, and we can see that the BTR immediately went out of control, confirming the idea that the hatch caught a lot of the shrapnel and projected it straight downwards into the BTR. We don't know how many Russian infantry were also, demobilized on top of the BTR, but we could get a good idea that it must have been at least half of them. We can now see a very interesting stylized Ukrainian pigeon, and then the video ends. Very nice. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, where we also saw an MTLB driving by a Ukrainian T-72B that was in action in this area. We can't play the audio in this one, it's copyrighted, but we can see the MTLB moving up, and we can see a Ukrainian T-72B. Actually, that appears to be a T-72BV, which is incredibly rare, actually. There's really not a lot of T-72s out there with that kind of armor layout. But we can see it sitting on the side, and some of y'all may be wondering, what, is this thing abandoned? No, because we can see that all of the hatches are closed, and whenever tanks are abandoned, the hatches are left open. So this tank is being crewed. We couldn't hear the engine in the audio because there's so much freaking music playing in it. But we can see them passing right by. And very nice to see another T-72 of the Ukrainian forces in operation as this MTLB moves off the line and disengages. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into the area of Volnovakha. We actually saw something fairly interesting in Volnovakha today, which is a Ukrainian artillery strike. We don't know what it hit, But we do know that it apparently caused a decent amount of damage to Volnovakha. We'll be getting more news on this later, and we also have a lot of news on what happened in Rakove after that ammo depot exploded. We can see in the distance inside of Volnovakha an explosion, and we can also see a small convoy of Russians over here. You can hardly see them under the watermark, but they appear to be tweaking out from the explosion in the distance, and they're just running everywhere in between the trucks. You can see that right there. Oh, bled, even! I didn't know we were going to war! Get me out of here! And we hear the explosion still happening on whatever this is in Volnovakha, and it appears that it may actually be an artillery strike. We can also see Russian military vehicles driving wild everywhere, speeding down the roads trying to get away from here. But we still don't know what that is at the moment.
Seems like everybody wants to get away from that.
Yeah, I think everyone's speeding now. Dude, the police in this area, like the Russian police, are going, oh my god, it's ticket heaven. Just pull everyone over and give them tickets so it's going to be rich. Bribe them, bullet. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from Volnovakha, and of course at the moment, while we saw the explosion, we don't know what kind of damage was actually caused by the explosion. However, we have been getting a lot of news about the damage that was caused at Rakove. And it has been pretty significant. We even got the exact location where the explosion happened, now that it's been a few days past. So the town of Rakove is a very small town along the major railroad avenue, I guess you could say a railroad corridor, that leads down to the Chonhar Gap down here and on into Crimea. It's one of the most important railroad lines that the Russians control at this point as far as supplying Crimea goes, but its importance was completely negated as a major railroad bridge down this corridor was destroyed somewhere in the area, I believe, of Novonivka or Solokirny or Druzhba. It's somewhere around here. It was destroyed, and so far this rail corridor has been out of action. However, that doesn't mean that all the supplies that have been built up along this corridor cease to exist or just magically disappeared. They are still there. And in Rakove, we actually found out that the supplies were not brought by truck corridor out of the rail yard and down into this little facility here, where we actually thought that this ammo depot was for the longest time. No. Russian incompetence goes far deeper and far greater than you would imagine. You see, there was this giant facility here right along the railroad tracks, right on the rail corridor, that actually ended up being the ammo depot. So the trains would just pull down the rail corridor, as you can see right here. They would just stop, and they would just move the railroad cars over here to these sidings, and they would just unload them directly on the side of the railroad tracks and into this compound here. And we found out today that the damage caused to that compound was significant. It's been leveled. And so here is the before picture taken by Skywatch. We can see the before picture like we just saw there. And here's the after picture.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, it leveled the rail corridor in this area. It pretty much destroyed all the railroad tracks directly alongside it. And it also appears that the damage was so severe. And look at these village houses up here in the top part of the screen and also along the road right by the rail corridor. It ended up leveling those too.
And what weapon was this again?
We believe it may have been a Storm Shadow that hit this ammo depot, or it may have been a HIMARS missile. It's most likely a Storm Shadow, though, due to the range it is behind the lines. So we think it was a Storm Shadow that hit this ammo depot, and it leveled it completely. There's really nothing left at this point. And this is giving us a very good look at what the Storm Shadow is going to help the Ukrainians to be capable of, which is hitting those very large ammo depots like we used to see all over the place at the beginning of the war that now only exist well behind the lines. And this is before they distribute this ammo into the open air ammo depots that we commonly see near the front lines at this point. So this one is completely gone. In fact, the rail corridor, if they were using this to supply Russian forces in Kherson and Crimea, that's going to be out of action for a pretty good while too, because the entire rail yard pretty much just beside this compound was destroyed as well. And that'll take a decent amount of effort to install the switches and to also install the actual rail lines again before this rail corridor even becomes operational at all. And there isn't even any supplies to pull out of this rail corridor because the supply depot is literally gone. It's just flattened, except for these two buildings here. Those are kind of still standing, but I'm sure they're very unstable. And so with that is pretty much the best summary that we could give of everything that has happened in relation to the Southern Front today, all the way from Rakove over to Volnovakha and along the front lines itself in the two heaviest areas of fighting we've seen near Lubkove and Orikhiv. while the news here and the story we've been able to put out today has been far more intricate and far more detailed than we've ever been able to put out, thanks to the great level of information that the Ukrainians have provided during this part of the offensive, there has still been a lot of questions surrounding everything involving the counteroffensive and a lot of things outside of the counteroffensive so far in the war. And Matthew's been asking you all these questions, and so far, loads of y'all have been answering them. Thousands of y'all have ended up answering these questions. And I want to hear what y'all have been thinking about some of the leading, I guess you could say, questions that a lot of people have been having throughout this day, or really over the past 48 hours. And Matthew, what have people been saying?
All right, so let's see what y'all have been saying. And the very first poll says, Ukraine says the main strike for the offensive is still ahead, and should this have already occurred? It looks like 74% said it's taking place appropriately, 10% said it should have already happened, 9% said unsure, and 7% said, it's probably okay now. And for me personally, I would trust that the Ukrainian army knows when to make the main strike. But logic tells me, or would suggest to me, that the main strike might have occurred first. I'm not really sure why it didn't, but maybe the Enforcer can fill me in. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the offensive is most likely going according to plan. But one thing that is interesting is that they're saying that the major offensive is to come a little bit later. I've got to be honest, I don't really know, because it seemed as though the major part of the offensive is already happening right now. But it may be the case that this is just probing attacks, or it may be a distraction. I'm not really sure at this point, to be honest with you. And I'm not going to crystal ball on this actually anymore, because they are doing their own thing to the point that I'm not really understanding what the actual end goal is or how this strategy will unfold. Because over the past few offensives, all we would say is, oh, these offensives will happen. And we didn't really go into a lot of detail about how they would happen or why. And then we started to get a pretty good pattern off of Balaklia and Kherson as to how Ukrainian offensives were being conducted up to that point. They were very quick breakthrough attacks that would then push as far as they could, and it would disrupt the Russian lines so greatly the Russians would just have to retreat in leaps and bounds to try and reform a defensive position somewhere. And that was the kind of precedent we had laid out up till this point. With this offensive and how it's happened, and we know that about 2 weeks ago, Zelensky did say the offensive had begun, and now they're saying that this isn't really the whole-on massive offensive. I'm not really sure what kind of strategy they're using at this point, because it's completely different than the other two strategies that they used in their other two prior counteroffensives. So, to be honest with you, I'd have to say I don't know. I'm just going to wait and see how this one unfolds, and maybe this will give us an idea of how further Ukrainian counteroffensives will unfold later on in the war, if they even follow this doctrine. They may be trying to test out new stuff that the West has been teaching them about in our doctrine and trying to see if it really does work or not in the current war. So, with that, I hope that addresses...
And also, I see here that Activista said only 35% of the forces are committed, not the offensive, still looking for the weak spot. And if that is the case, then it makes sense their main strike hasn't come yet. But I was under the impression that this was their big push, like Zelensky said. But if it isn't, it's fine. But, I was under a different impression.
I think everyone was largely under a different impression, but if this isn't the main offensive, and I have heard that number, that only around 30% of Ukrainian forces have been committed, and we've been trying to look into this a little bit behind the scenes, it may be the case that these are just the probing attacks. I thought it was actually the main attack, and if the Ukrainians were attempting to mislead the Russians into thinking that this is as bad as it was going to get, they not only fooled the Russians, they fooled us as well. So we'll just have to wait and see how it unfolds from here forward. But I'm going to withhold judgment for now about how the counteroffensive is going, because it sounds as though they have a lot more up their sleeve than what we've been seeing already. And so with that, hope that addresses that question fairly well. Very interesting one. And a lot of people have inputted, a large majority, all saying it's going according to plan. And I would say the Ukrainians certainly do have some very intensive planning that went into this offensive. It's just that we can't see it all in one fell swoop. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next poll says another Pentagon accounting error turns up a measly $6.2 billion for Ukraine. And what are your thoughts? 47% said that's great, it sounds legit. 8% said unsure. 31% said I don't think these are errors. And 14% said that's bad. Where was all that money? And once again, it's another issue of basically miscalculating the value of the equipment that we're sending to Ukraine, or at least that's what the Pentagon claims. I'll be totally honest. I really don't think they are errors. I think they intentionally miscalculated so that way later they could play with the numbers and send more equipment if needed, to avoid having to get approval for it. Nothing wrong with that. But to say it's an accounting error, I'm not totally on board with that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, I would say I
A
love how the
measly
first.
6.2 billion.
Yeah, hey, it sounds legit. That part made me laugh. Honestly, it's like, hey, that sounds completely legit. I don't know what the hell is going on with the Pentagon. I got to be honest with y'all. I don't like the idea of it being an accounting error where just $6.2 billion. It was just a misaccounting of that level. Do y'all know how much that really is? Do y'all know how much a Gerald R. Ford supercarrier costs? Let me go pull that up for y'all real quick. A Gerald R. Ford class carrier costs $13 billion. That means they had an accounting error, if we're going off of what they said, of half of a Gerald R. Ford supercarrier. When you put that in...
Enforcer, are you doing the financing and accounting for them?
Maybe. I mean, like, it's bad at this point. It's bad off. But I would say that it doesn't sound good. I would say that it would be a lot better to be more upfront with the actual listed value of the vehicles we're sending instead of hyperinflating them and then going back later and saying, oh, wait a minute, we have an accounting error here. And they've been doing that a lot. Everyone's saying in the live chat right now, they've been overvaluing it. And we know that. We know that for certain at this point. And I don't like the idea of that because it makes it seem as though either the Department of Defense is incompetent with their accounting, or we are trying to shortchange the Ukrainians and the support they get for the cost it is, and then later on, when we want to help them out more, we go back and do some magic witchcraft with the books, and then we come up with more money. I don't really like the way that's looking, honestly. It's great to know that we'll be able to give them more support, but honestly, I would like it to be more upfront, actually properly evaluating the equipment cost and sending the proper amount in the first place. And really, my main complaint, if y'all see where I'm coming from here, is that that's starting to limit the amount of support we can actually send at an instantaneous moment. Like, let's say right now we send a $6 billion support package, and we once again overvalue the equipment and vehicles in that package again, and we can only send, and let's just say it's all one piece of equipment. Let's say we send like 40 F-16s. We're overvaluing that equipment so much, we could have actually sent 80 F-16s in that package, and then later on we'll go back and go, oh, it's an accounting error, and then we're sending those 40 F-16s that could have originally been sent during that first support package months later. And it's starting to make our support trickle instead of just flow in like it should be based off of the monetary cost. So that would be my honest opinion on it. I think we need to change that and make sure going forward we no longer have clerical errors like that because it doesn't look good, and it's also limiting the actual support we can get to Ukraine at any given moment. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I see some folks saying that the government always loses money. It's on purpose. And, can't say that for certain, but, when $2 billion, billions of dollars here and there come up missing all the time, that money's not missing. They know where it is, but they're not going to tell us. But moving on to our next poll, our third one, it says Russia says that if Crimea is bombed, then the U.S. and U.K. will get fully dragged into conflict. And what are your thoughts? 60% said it's false, that wouldn't happen. 26% said it might, but unlikely. 7% said it's true, it would cause it. And 7% also said unsure. And on this one, it's totally false because Crimea has already been bombed, and that hasn't happened. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it hasn't happened, and I would have to agree with Matthew there. It just has not happened. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also getting back to the last poll, BC Skyman said, Ukraine needs more support. And I agree, and I honestly have to say it sounds as though those clerical errors, and I see a lot of people explaining why the clerical errors the way they are, and I have to be honest with y'all, and I'll just be completely frank here for a minute about the U.S. government. The U.S. government, the federal government, is an incredibly inefficient system. Money disappears like that all the time, and when we're sending military aid like we are right now, that actually gets in the way of us providing a large amount of support, is because we're overvaluing the equipment we're sending over. Instead of an M113 actually costing $100,000, we're listing it as costing $300,000, and that greatly limits the amount of equipment we can send over in these support packages, and then we find out later, oh, look, we could have sent more, and by that point, we could have already equipped the Ukrainians and had them as a completely westernized army by this point if we hadn't had these clerical errors. And that's something I'm not really liking there that much. And I know that a lot of y'all are really blown away, a lot of Americans especially, with me saying that the federal government is an incredibly inefficient system. It's not like anybody's known that for centuries at this point. But I think that, if anything, while the inefficiencies will probably continue forever because it continues under every administration for centuries, it needs to really have a handle put on it, at least in this particular instance, or we need to have it already known by the Department of Defense, go ahead and devalue the equipment so that way more of it can be sent to try and fix the over-accounting wherever it may be. Let's see. And also, Hoodoo Texas said, money no longer means what you think it means anymore. Nowadays, it's just math. And that's kind of true. It's numbers on a screen for the large part, but we're ascribing a false number, a false value on that computer screen at this point to equipment and weapons that cost far less. And that is meaning that we're sending over less support for the amount of imaginary numbers we have on the screen. And I think that they should get as much as they need at the moment we're sending that package, instead of coming around later and using the clerical error, statement to then send more later. Just send it all up front.
Although I will say it might be smart, though, because the Ukrainians have a habit of using literally everything we send them the moment they get it. And it's understandable because they're in a fight for their life, but at the same time, by doing this little accounting trick here, which is basically what I think it is, we can send them more equipment when they eventually run out of all the stuff we sent them before, so that way we don't have to seek approval the second time. We can get it there much faster.
That's possible. That's actually not a bad way to look at it, but, still, to me, I'm not seeing it that way, but that's still not a bad way to look at it, and that may be the reason why they're doing it. But with that, I hope we address that one fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, is the Bradley vehicle the best equipment Ukraine has received in months? 49% said yes, 29% said no, and 23% said unsure. And to me, I think the Bradley is the best vehicle it's received in months. Of course, they've received several other things like drones, small arms, and other equipment. I would say the Bradley is probably the best. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I think the Bradley is honestly one of the best vehicles that they have received from the Western world in a good while, at least so far this year. It's not that bad. It's a great vehicle. One thing I will say, though, is that it does have an inherent weakness. Its armor is thin, and so it can easily be destroyed, of course, by anti-tank guided missiles, RPGs, and the like. Its armor is not in the main battle tank. It is still largely the armor class of a light tank, although it's an infantry fighting vehicle, so it can be punctured pretty easily by anti-tank weapons or tanks, but it still makes up for that in its great maneuverability. It's all-around firepower. It has a wonderful 25mm Bushmaster on it, and if you get the APFSDS shells for that thing, it was reported in the Gulf War that it was able to actually pierce the frontal armor of T-72As, and that's incredibly good for a 25mm gun. The TOW-2s and the TOW-2Bs that most of the Bradleys are using that we sent over there, they're also incredibly effective as well at knocking out tanks miles away. Also, the travel time on those things is, from what we can tell, even faster than a Stugna, because the missile travels faster in flight than the Stugna, so I guess you could say the time to target is a lot shorter than it would be with other kinds of anti-tank guided missiles like we've seen being used in the war. So it's all around an amazing system, and the ergonomics of it are incredible as well. It has great sights, it has great, I guess you could say, crew comfort and crew space, which is very important, and lowering the fatigue rates of the operators of those vehicles. It is a great system all around. I think that if we had to place it on up there in a tier list, I would say that the Bradley is probably number 1 or number 2, and the only vehicle that is giving it a run for its money would be the Leopard 2A6 at this point, as far as actual frontline service equipment goes. I would say that the Challenger 2, once it enters service, will probably usurp both of those and become number 1 as the best vehicle the Ukrainians have, but we haven't seen any Challenger 2s used on the front line yet, so we'll have to wait and see if that one is as truly good as we think it will be based off of its prior combat performance in other wars like the Gulf War and the invasion of Iraq. Oh, I'm sorry, the Gulf War, the Challenger 2 wasn't used yet. It was only used in the invasion of Iraq. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, just real quick, kind of off topic, I saw Donna Olson say, anyone here if they found that sub yet? Did you hear about that, Enforcer, about the Titanic tour sub getting lost under the water and it has like 40 hours of oxygen left?
Yeah, I did. I did hear about that. I heard that apparently they're somewhere out here. They're somewhere right there. And
that would be scary.
Yeah, the little submersible was last spotted literally over the Titanic. It was like, I think, 100 feet above the Titanic, and then its transponder went off. I'm going to be honest with y'all, with the transponder going off like that, I'm having a feeling it probably... I guess well, the best way. I'm trying to cut out, I guess you could say I use that a lot because I'm always trying to come up with a good word for something. But it most likely reached crush depth, and it wasn't really rated for that depth, and it just ended up imploding on itself, and everyone's lost. A lot of people have been making a huge stink out of a bunch of folks getting inside of a submarine that is literally operated by an Xbox controller. But in my honest opinion, they wanted to take on the risk. They were all willing to do it, and if they ended up getting into some trouble because of that, well, that was their move to make, I guess. It wasn't really a smart one, though, but it was their move nonetheless. All I hope is that, regardless of what happened to them, whether they end up at the bottom of the sea forever, or if they end up being recovered, I just hope that they ended up doing no damage to the wreck of the Titanic, because considering that the last time the transponder reported a location, they were directly over the Titanic. If it imploded over the Titanic, its wreckage could have fallen directly on top of the Titanic, and considering how brittle and fragile the wreck is at this point, it could have ended up causing some very serious damage to it. So hopefully that wasn't the case. But they
Let me tell you, you won't catch me getting on a homemade sub to go look at something under the sea. That's crazy to me.
You know, I would have immediately stepped off that sub as soon as the guy piloting it sat there and whipped out a Logitech Xbox controller and said, "We pilot the submarine with this." I was like, "All right, it's nice knowing you. I'm out." I would have been like, "I'm not staying here, man. That's not smart." But anyways.
Hopefully people are okay, though, but I don't think it's been found yet, to answer the question.
No, it hasn't been found. I'm going to be honest, it's not going to be found. It's a minivan-sized submarine, and they're having to search over an area the size of Connecticut to try and find this thing. And imagine trying visually underwater with no visible light down there at that depth, trying to find a minivan in pitch darkness over an area the size of Connecticut. It's going to be practically impossible at this point.
Yeah, that's. I'll leave it at that, but I hope they're found.
Well, hopefully they're found, but I gotta be honest, I don't think they will be found. Not saying that it's goofy or anything, but getting inside of a nearly homemade submarine that in 2018, I believe it was the NTSB, actually said that that submarine was not seaworthy to travel to those depths. That is almost trying to go for a Darwin Award on the spot right there. So, anyways, with that, hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our first super chat, because we are out of polls now, goes to none other than Jesus UCSB, who puts in a very generous $100 donation. And thank you very much, Jesus, for that support. He says, "Hola, I just got back from Ensenada, Baja, Mexico, and I will be in Mexico City in 2 weeks. I'll be repping the LSA down under. And I'm still waiting for Russia or anyone else to come at me. And LSA, homie."
And I thank you so much for the support, Jesus, and helping this channel keep on running, because folks like you make this thing possible. And I gotta thank you so much for appreciating this channel enough to find it worthwhile to support, because folks like you are the only way we can keep the channel running. And also, really cool you went to Ensenada. Well, let's find that. It's in Baja. So, there it is. Actually, right there. There's Ensenada. Interesting.
Right there.
Interesting. Look at that. And let's see if we can drop down there and take a look. Oh, wow, they actually have Street View. Oh, wow.
Well, that's a nice house.
Yeah, this kind of looks like Arizona. Let's take a look.
That's
at
actually
this
pretty
place.
cool.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Oh, used car lot. Right behind the nice house, a used car lot. Wait a minute, does that mean that's not a house that's part of a used car dealership? But really not that bad, actually. This is not that bad. Wait a minute. An old look.
Yeah, did you see that?
Old Volkswagen Beetle with white walls, even. That is pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
I'm not gonna lie, but pretty neat and pretty cool to know that you're going to be going all the way down to Mexico City, which is pretty much a whole different part of Mexico. Like, many people don't know this outside of Mexico, but Mexico is actually divided into pretty much like how the United States has the northern U.S. and the southern U.S. with completely different cultures. It is the same way in Mexico. There is a northern Mexico with a completely different culture than southern Mexico. Southern Mexico is what you would call the northern United States here in America. It's the more developed part of the country, a lot more populous, and also the quality of life is higher down here than it is up here. Up here in northern Mexico, this would be kind of similar to the southern U.S. It's less populated, it's more rural in its mindset, but it's still very interesting nonetheless. Of course, you know, there's been some problems lately with, you know, the cartels running it wild, but still, you know, that's kind of like the mob here in America. It'll eventually be sorted out. It'll just take, of course, time, a lot of time. But still, really cool to know that you'll be going down to Mexico City in 2 weeks. I hope you have a fun time down there, because our mom actually went to Mexico City, I think, back in the 80s or something like that on a vacation, and she said it was a really cool place. She said Mexico City was amazing. And so I hope you have a fun time down there, Jesus, and thank you so much once again for being the Lee Spring Army tanker and supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. It's truly incredible to think that folks have voluntarily decided to support this channel for so long that we've been able to make it possible. And I got to thank you so much once again, Jesus, for supporting this channel tonight and helping us to make this channel possible. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for the massive amount of support and being a part of the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one. Also, let me grab a bot real quick. A nasty Russian bot, and he's gone.
Oh,
Bot be gone. Our next super chat goes to none other than Hal Rose, who puts in a very generous $33 donation. And thank you, Hal, very much for always supporting the channel, and we appreciate it very much. And he said, Enforcer Matt, NATO wants to get all the paperwork for Ukrainian membership done in advance so that Ukraine can become a member in a flash in case ecological disasters force action. And I will say, Hal, real quick before the Enforcer answers that, the last time I heard, it sounded like the U.S. was basically saying they're not going to make it easy for Ukraine to join NATO. So I'm not sure if that's totally recent or not. But Enforcer, what have you heard?
I've actually heard today from Secretary Stoltenberg of NATO that Ukraine cannot wait for the war to end to join NATO. And we actually have a little bit of a transcript of that right here. So I'll read this all for y'all, considering that this is a perfect time just to jump into this news real quick. This is a standalone thing. But this is from Stoltenberg. Let's see, wait, hang on. This is former Secretary General Rasmussen. Sorry about that, I got the name wrong. I reflected carefully on this issue because it would be the first time we invite into NATO a country that is at war. That requires careful consideration. I've reached this conclusion for 3 reasons. 1, in 2008, we decided that Ukraine will become a member of NATO, but we did not provide a roadmap. Now Ukraine has been in the waiting room for 15 years. It is not a safe place. The waiting room is surrounded by a gang of thugs who attacked those waiting. Time has come to move Ukraine into a safe place, as we are doing with Finland and Sweden. It is argued that the prospect of NATO enlargement incited Putin. The truth is the opposite. It was the failure to extend security guarantees to Ukraine that incited Putin. Gray zones and are danger zones. Neutrality provides no security, as Finland and Sweden realized. And 3, I hear the argument that we cannot give Ukraine NATO membership while there is an ongoing war. That is an extremely dangerous argument. If you make security guarantees and NATO membership dependent on cessation of hostilities, you give Putin an incentive to continue the war indefinitely. By extending an invitation now, we tell Putin, Ukraine will become a member of NATO. You cannot stop this process. Our door is open for Ukraine, and you are not the doorman. And then moving on to the next part. Let me stress, an invitation does not imply a session overnight. After the invitation, we'll have to work out practicalities regarding Article 5. Which area will be covered? How will we react if and when there will be new clashes in occupied territories? In the best case, those issues will be solved by the Ukrainians themselves when they kick all the Russian troops from Ukrainian soil. If not, we will have to find appropriate answers. They are important topics for allies that take Article 5 seriously, which is really everyone. We must find the right solution for commitments that could include the deployment of troops and military equipment to Ukraine. Regardless, Ukraine needs security guarantees now. We need strong measures to deter further Russian aggression. That is the purpose of the Kyiv Security Compact that I co-authored with Andrei Yermak. These guarantees will not replace Ukrainian membership of NATO. They can provide a bridge until it is covered by Article 5. A previous version of this article incorrectly referred to Anders Fogh Rasmussen, Rasmussen, as NATO Secretary General. He's actually the former NATO Secretary General and led NATO between 2009 and 2014. So it appears that the former Secretary Rasmussen is actually stating that we should start to move Ukraine into NATO membership now. And it seems as though there's starting to be a split in between 2 schools of thought within NATO, as in we need to wait for the war to be over, like the United States is now claiming with Ukraine, and now there's a whole new school popping up, and it appears that Rasmussen may be at the head of that one, that Ukraine needs to start moving towards the ascension into NATO at this moment, and they need to start working on that as the war goes on. Otherwise, the Russians will begin a phony war where it goes on forever, like the one we see in the Koreas to this day. So that appears to be the case of what's going on there in NATO, and I gotta thank you so much for the support, Hal Rose. and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that kind of addressed the standing right now in NATO as to what we're seeing in between the two opposite sides, the folks who want Ukraine to start NATO application for membership now, and folks like the United States government who now want Ukraine to join NATO after the war has ended. So with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Hal, in helping this channel keep on running. You have been around forever and have been a channel old guard. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the segment. And thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope that did answer that fairly well. And also covered a little bit of the news in the meantime.
Yes, indeed. And our next and last super chat of this segment goes to Thomas Marsh, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Thomas, very much for the support. And he says, let's go!
Let's go! And thank you so much, Thomas, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for supporting us so that way we can help this thing to keep on let's going! And thank you so much once again. It means a lot to us that folks have supported this channel for quite a while, and continue to support this channel because it's the only way that we keep this thing running. There's, and this is something fairly interesting, unlike other YouTube channels, there's no things behind the scenes that help this channel to keep on rolling. There's no ads, there's no memberships, there's nothing. It's all super chats. And that's the only way we can keep this thing rolling and help to support ourselves and make this our job that we do combined in between the both of us 100 hours a week. And I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for supporting this channel, because y'all help us to be able to do this as a full-time job. And not only that, y'all help us to be sponsor-free and ad-free, so that way we don't have any pressures from the outside telling us what we can and what we can't cover, and how we can and how we cannot cover it. We end up covering this the way we want, and y'all pretty much end up being the sponsors. If y'all enjoy the channel and want to help it keep on running, y'all can. If y'all don't want to, you don't have to. And so with that, thank you to all of y'all so much once again, Thomas, Hal, and Jesus UCSB for helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, we'll be getting to everyone else's later on during the last question segment of the night, which will probably be coming up in about 20-30 minutes or so. But with that, it's now time for us to move on out of the southern front and on into the area of the Novokakhovka Reservoir, because things have been going not too well there. And starting off with the satellite video, we actually saw what the Novokakhovka Reservoir looks like now near the ZMPP. And you can kind of see a little sneak peek of it right there. Here's what it looked like on the 6th of June. This is what it looks like today. It's empty.
Oh.
And that's not good, because you can see the cooling pond is really the only body of water around, and there is a channel leading to it, and we may assume that the pumps are somewhere in this area, but beyond that, this is a very precarious situation, and there is very little water in the Kakhovka Reservoir for the ZMPP to work with. And that is, of course, very risky in its own right. Moving on out of that little bit of news, once again, not trying to freak anyone out, but showing the reality of what's happening in that area, we're now going to be moving on down into Kherson, where we saw some rescue services coming under attack that were attempting to still help and evacuate Ukrainian citizens from the city. One of the guys who was in this video actually ended up being killed later on, I believe after this video ends, by artillery strikes from the Russian army. Here's
Стой! Виглянь через двері, щоб
when you see them getting out of the vehicle. I believe there's some kind of a mud flat up here. You see this guy running down the street. And we see the guy right there, actually. We'll be ending that clip right there to respect the poor man who ended up suffering there. And also, YouTube may not like us to show something like that on air. But it is incredibly aggravating and incredibly infuriating to know that as the Ukrainians continue to fight and defend the city of Kherson and to help try and save the people who are still suffering from the effects of the flood, the Russians are continuing to attack them and attack the people who are down there trying to help to save lives. And the Russians are ending the lives of people who are there to save. And it's absolutely sickening. But there was a small clip of that, and if y'all want to see the rest of that clip and understand what Russian brutality really looks like, you can click on the link in the description below for the Day 482 map, and it'll take you directly to that video clip. But with that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip here in the Kherson area, where we saw something of a little bit of a funnier light. We got to see the great American pickup truck, a Ford F-Series, pulling an M777. And it's pulling an entire M777 behind it. Have you ever wanted yourself a brand new Ford F-250? You ever needed the pulling power to whip around an entire M777 artillery piece? Well, you, my friend, are in luck. Introducing the all-new Ford 2009, I didn't say it was brand new, I meant pre-used, Ford F-250. With a brand new diesel engine and an amazing amount of horsepower, it will carry around the greatest American firepower you can ever imagine. Watch as that M777 destroys some Russian forces in the distance, and watch as they load up the M777 with ease and the confidence of knowing that the Ford F-250 will carry the way. Guts, glory, Ford.
Man, the Ukrainians are going to love America before this war is over.
Man, they're going to be playing America! Yeah,
they're going to be like, how come we didn't know about these Ford trucks before, Bliat?
Man, I bet you they're going to be loving those things. And I see that the Chevy haters are real quiet in the chat. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. But anyways, with that, well, we have now started a civil war, in case if any of you are not from America and don't know that Ford and Chevy people are violent people. Like, they are violent against each other, commit raw acts of violence. But anyways, we're going to be moving on out of there and on into Russia for a minute, because Snapchat is now being used to locate the Russian army and the reinforcements. I'll show you all the proof. We can see here someone zooming in on their snap map. Near Rostov-on-Don, we can see this person is Polish, because these are actually the Polish spellings of the towns. And we now see them showing the Russian main battle tanks at the station as they're bringing them into Ukraine. And it gives you the exact name of the town as Kamensk Shchetinsky in Russia, or as it's called in Polish, Rusland. And there's a Russian guy on a train, showing exactly where the train is. And then this guy just gets off of Snapchat. He's like, huh, very nice. But with that, that's the end of that clip. And now we can see that Snapchat is now a weapon of war. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into the western area of Ukraine as well, where we also saw some Ukrainian soldiers training with a brand new Polish BMP-1. We can see that it still has its original Polish camouflage. And we can see it firing its 76mm recoilless gun right there. And we can also see some Ukrainian soldiers training alongside the BMP. We can once again see it right out there. And very interesting to see. We're now going to be moving on into our Kyiv news for a minute as well. Before we get to those location unknowns, I'm trying to hit all of the smaller pieces here, where we saw that Budanov is alive. Many people have been saying that Budanov is dead and Budanov has been killed. And here is Budanov's comments on these rumors. So how is Kirilo Aleskevich? Are they saying you were killed? Coma, American plane, German, Azarov, Kiva? Could you comment on this? I got killed, then, if following their logic, I got resurrected. After that, I got wounded by something again, probably by a missile that everyone has already seen that hit the water. After that, I was heavily wounded. Then, according to their logic, I, while unconscious, was transported by an American flying apparatus to Germany, and judging from all of this, that's where I am right now. Should I pass some messages to these fools? Nah, what can you pass on to them? Greetings to Kiva. And then that's the end of the clip, and the little picture in the background of Zelensky back there went, Slava Ukraini. And he went, what?
Yes.
He's like, what? But anyways.
This guy's a nice chair, by the way. Nice, one of those gaming chairs.
And he also has a little embroidered Ukrainian seal on it. Very nice, I gotta say, respect. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of Kyiv and on into our location unknowns, because we have a fairly interesting number of location unknowns, starting off with our first one, showing a damaged Ka-52 limping home. Now, I uploaded this the other day as a short war summary on Monday, and many people wanted to tell me that this helicopter had dropped its drop tanks, and that's where it suffered the damage from. However, from what I can tell, that is not the case. We can already see at the beginning of the video, before it drops the fuel tanks, that the vertical stabilizer is already gone, meaning that this Ka-52 was damaged before the drop tanks were even let go. We can now see it dropping those drop tanks, and we can see the pieces of the drop tanks falling off, and we can also see something right there. I don't know what that is, but it's another part of the helicopter. And we now see the other Russian helicopter getting close. We can see that the Ka-52 has deployed its landing gear, and we can see its vertical stabilizer right back there, barely hanging on by a thread. And we can see the helicopter having to take whatever path is necessary to try and keep this thing flying. Another rare thing about this helicopter is that it's carrying Vickers missiles, and we rarely ever see those missiles being used, considering you have to have visual contact with enemy forces to be able to operate these. You see it continuing to fly forward. Once again, parts of the vertical stabilizer just flapping around the wind. Kind of like Russian bots and their inputs on this channel, just flapping around the wind, quickly to disappear. And when you see the pilot struggling to keep control of the helicopter, and it appears that they're now flying in a circle. But with that...
And it's flying just like one of those RC, like, mall helicopters you used to get.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And you know the pilots are sitting in there, man, and they are sweating like pigs, man. They're like, oh my god, don't let it fall from the sky, Blad. Don't let it fall from the sky. But anyways, we're now going to be moving on from this little video, Blad. And moving on into our next one, where we saw 5 Russians surrendering. And here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can also hear that techno-dystopian music that played right after the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s. And we can see them bringing these homeless Russians to a truck. They will have a forever home in a Ukrainian POW camp. And we can see the local meth head here, and it appears that he was trying to say something. But anyways, we're now moving on from that little bit, and on into today's Location Unknowns, showing a little clip of some simulated training. We didn't know where this occurred. We could have put it in Western Ukraine, but what fun would have that been? They are using lasers attached to their rifles, and then if you get hit, you actually get a little electrical shock, kind of like those monkeys that they had in training at NASA back in the 50s, to let you know that you ended up being shot. You see the soldier moving forward. And you see him getting shocked right there, and it appears that it hurts. Man, this is some of that Blade Runner crap, man. Like,
what, they hooked up to the mains or something?
oh my god.
That guy's acting like he's dying from that.
And as you all can all tell, that was the simulated version of death. But
and also a side effect, you also get seizure afterward, too.
He sits there and he hears pop, 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 and he goes, oh god. And then it's like, oh my god, they're electrocuting the man. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from that clip. It appears that they're trying to make training a lot more immersive and letting you know the pain of being shot. And with that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip where we saw Ukrainians, and also, by the way, I have to change my tone here for a minute because this is a little bit more of a serious clip. We saw a Ukrainian soldier brought back. He was not, of course, sleeping, as many of y'all know. That is a colloquial term around here for something else. He was not sleeping, but it appears that he was knocked unconscious by something during some intense firefights, and the Ukrainian soldier pulled out a water bottle to bring him back, and he was quite disoriented when he was brought back. I'll be showing you all this clip, but it is a little bit more of a serious one, and so it's not really much of a joking matter. This man was in a pretty rough state. But here's the clip. You can see the soldier here knocked out on the ground, and we can see this guy pouring water and trying to bring him back as some Ukrainian soldiers sit in the dugout nearby. You can see the soldier is back, and we can see the soldier trying to calm him. And we hear the firefight continuing on in the background. And we now see the soldier composing himself after coming back. We can see him right there. But with that, that's the end of that clip. And I thought it was an important one to show. We usually don't show clips like this. There's nothing against community guidelines or anything graphic, but it is still pretty straining on the nerves and the emotions to see a poor man like that being knocked out and then coming back and clearly freaking out due to the firefight. It's great to know that that soldier is, of course, defending his country and putting his life out there on the line to save the innocents behind the lines, the millions of them that there are, and to help stop Russian aggression. But, of course, you can see that it does have a bit of a toll on some soldiers like this poor man here. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to our next one, where we also saw a Danish Caesar SPG firing at Russian forces. This was a fairly short clip, but this was a Caesar from Denmark. And man, would you look at that Dane right there? that has a bit of a different meaning.
That's a great Dane.
Man, that's a great Dane right there. And we can see them firing the Caesar here. Really cool to see. And it looks like they're having a lot of fun with it. And with that, we're going to be moving on from that low clip and on into our last bit of Location Unknown news, the Russian casualty report. And oh, buddy.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness, we got 5 Bobcats in one day.
5 Bobcats split.
Oh.
And we can see many memes. Many memes.
Hey, let's go. Of course you're commenting.
Look at that. I was commenting myself. That's me, guys. That's me personally. We all know that's not me. That's Matthew. But anyways, very nice to see that they were able to get 5 Bobcats today, and they were able to get 4 the other day as well. But moving on from that, there is a far more pressing number on this sheet than any other one. 1,010 Russian soldiers. 24 hours, 1,010 Russian soldiers. That means
That's pretty high.
And that is pretty high. That means that over the past 24 hours, there has been 42 Russian... Wait a minute, hang on. I'm not sure if that is correct. Hang on. Excuse me here. Excuse me. Yeah, 42 Russian soldiers per hour of the day. The whole day. That's pretty high. And of course, that is starting to inflict a massive amount of damage on the Russian forces in the south. We know that most of these losses were taken in the area of Bakhmut, Orikhiv, and also Lipkove, and that's where we think the majority of those losses were had, and then maybe 200 or 300 of those were taken from the rest of the front lines cumulative. We also saw that 15 armored personnel carriers were wiped out over the past 24 hours as well, along with 32 supply trucks, an incredibly high number. We also saw that 8 main battle tanks were destroyed, 23 artillery pieces, 10 drones, 4 MLRSs, a helicopter, 3 cruise missiles, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems were also knocked out as well. These numbers are all above average in every single category, and showing that the Ukrainians have been able to deal a devastating blow to the Russian armed forces that are on the front lines today, and hopefully this will help them to succeed in fights leading on into tomorrow, which is actually today. The sun is rising in the next day in Ukraine as this channel runs, and so we'll see if all of these losses that the Ukrainians were able to inflict ended up helping them out in today's fighting. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the location unknowns and on into the front lines. We actually saw that there was a pickup of fighting in the Kremenna area, and we can see that, of course, in Chernopapivka, things were popping off for the Russians. We can see the Russian tree lines here, and we can also see what appears to be some Russian MBTs. We can see the Ukrainian drone observing the Russian MBTs as what appears to be VOG fires coming in. One of them runs over a mine. Good stuff. It begins to toast. It begins to roast. And now it begins to boast about the massive explosion it had and the small turret toss that we did not see on film.
That's quite a clever poem.
And I must say, someone turned that into a haiku. Tut-tut. But anyways, that's
could we please have this in prose?
Me and my beautiful wife, Camilla, would like to have that in a poem. But anyways, that's seeing that little clip right there. And great to see the Ukrainians were able to get another Russian MBT with an AT mine. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on towards the Kremenna Woods, where we saw that the Ukrainians have been hitting some Russian infantry near Kremenna. And I gotta say, Matthew, call this abuse, because these guys were getting beat silly like a stepchild. We can see the Russians here on film. And when you see them moving around this electrical pole, and it appears that they are about to become a question in the polls. And it looks like they got had.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. Oh, that's quite on. Oh! Oh, God!
Dear.
That was the artillery.
Oh, my.
Oh, my. Well, you now see them dropping another 2 bomblets. And boom, right near the bottom of the electrical pole, and we see a lot of them are taking naps. It was a very exhausting effort to deal with that artillery explosion, and so they're just resting a little.
Seemed like they might have gotten electrocuted, maybe, perhaps, at some point.
Roll on one. But anyways, we're going to be moving out of the Kremenna area because, of course, the Russians are not having that good of a time there, as we can tell. And it appears that that was actually a part of some Russian offensive efforts in the area. It's a very small offensive that's happening in that area by the Russians, and it appears that they're taking some pretty decent losses from that. We're now going to be moving out of that area and on down into Bakhmut. We haven't really seen a lot of major frontline advances to speak of, and let me refresh this map to make sure that they haven't updated this thing today. And they have updated it. So let's see what we've had. No, thank you. Over the past 48 hours. We've actually seen that Ukrainian forces were able to advance near the area of Orikhovo-Vasilivka, but it doesn't appear that they were able to advance in much other places, according to Deep State, in the area of Bakhmut. Starting off with our first clip, we saw some fighting in Bakhmut from a first-person perspective, from the unit Hatred that was fighting in Bakhmut. And I gotta say, they got a lot of hatred for the Russians. It's kind of in the name.
То точно наша, ну и пидорская, понял? Может, то и пидор. Давай, давай.
You see them firing a grenade launcher out there. And now coming back in the house, quite casually. We now see that guy also firing a grenade as well. And remember, everyone, Russian units can always be dealt with a proper amount of high explosives. And it appears that they are putting that to practice. And you see them continuing to pop off those grenades.
Чуть-чуть левей.
We now see them passing around grenades.
Братан, то наши идут штурмовать, да. Фарш, смотри, то наши идут. Бери, раз, два. Там предохранитель закрыл, все, стой, не нажимай. Все, и вот это просто...
We see them talking about grenades. These guys love grenades.
Вот это получается торец, да? Короче, смотри, братан, они отсюда туда съебают.
We can see them engaging the Russian forces through an open window over there to the left of the screen. We now see them pulling back. And for this unit to be called Hatred, they have a pure love of 40mm grenades. With that, that's the end of the clip, and it's nice to see that they were using some nades in the Battle of Bakhmut. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, a little behind the lines, where we saw that the 92nd was able to shoot down a drone with a Strela. There's the Strela.
Damn.
Damn, son. And they got it.
Oh, dang.
That man sounded like he just got mauled by a dog, though.
Jeez. Man, that scream was not a scream of joy. That was like pure pain.
A letter for Miss Smith? Uh-oh, here comes the dog. Oh, man. But anyways, that's the end of the clip, but it's nice to see they were able to get a drone. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip near Klishkivka, where we saw some captured tanks in use. Ukrainian troops grind forward near Bakhmut thanks to captured Russian tanks, like this one here. Gah!
That was crispy sound.
This one was seized in the Kharkiv region last year. We got this tank from the Russian Lend-Lease Act, as we call it. What's good about it is that it's equipped with night vision and it has a range of about 4 kilometers. We use it during the day too, but mostly at night. It's a T-72B3M. It was modified in Russia in 2019. Relatively new. We first sent it to a Ukrainian manufacturing facility, where it was modernized according to our standards. Pretty much pimped the ride. Or, oh, there's the same line again. I thought a new one had popped up. We now see them moving around a T-80 there. And getting some fresh air. I'm on a Ukrainian tank near Soledar in Bakhmut. We're rushing to a firing position after a target has been identified. This is a Soviet-made T-80 tank that was captured by the Ukrainian army during the counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region. Now this vehicle helps Ukrainian troops retake territories occupied by the Russian army. Hey, what do you know? In this video, from the 2nd of June, this crew uses a captured T-80 to attack Russian trenches, as seen here. This helps us during our assault or in pushing back the enemy's attack. That is, we quickly move to a firing position to support our infantry and then roll back. Like tanks are supposed to be used. Now, the soldiers continue to push forward on appropriated Russian equipment. Kyiv officials say they are facing fierce resistance in the Bakhmut area, as Russian forces continue to focus on the embattled city and the surrounded territories. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but a very interesting look at those captured Russian tanks that the Ukrainians are using around the area. With that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip, where we saw the 3rd Brigade once again pushing home the attacks in the southern direction near Klishchiivka around Bakhmut. When you see a squad pushing forward into this tree line, and we can tell that they're clearly taking a Russian position even at the start of the film, as there's a large amount of trash.
Раз, два, три, давай.
You now see one of the Ukrainian infantrymen advancing forward across the road and towards the berm. We believe this berm, and I'll show y'all where this is. We believe the berm that's been constantly fought over in the southern area. If I can find Bakhmut here, I don't know why my eyes fail me. It's somewhere around here, actually, because you can see a little railroad berm right there. Of course, not getting into any exact details beyond that, but they have clearly pushed onto the railroad tracks down here in this direction, meaning that they have taken Klishchiivka and Andriivka at this point, or they're very close to it, or they're already in the plain that is where Klishchiivka is, one or the other.
Вон они, вон!
We see them running on forward.
Туда, дальше. Дальше. Все, сидим. Залазь. Пацаны, мы идем так же само с вами, нахуй, только мы не спускаемся на в блиндаже.
And we can see the Ukrainians and their love of high explosive never fails us. They whip out a grenade launcher immediately. He said, guys, hang on, I got this. And then he just whips out a grenade launcher immediately. It's like, ah, yes, it always fixes the problem. We can also hear a round fly over right here. Primo Victoria LSA said, I bet there's ticks in that grass. I bet you there's a lot worse in that grass, too. I have a feeling these guys are going to be eaten alive. We now see them running across another road, once again towards this berm that appears to be the railroad track. We now see them moving into some bunkers that have been made as artillery rains down nearby.
Там есть выход. Все, давай. Залазь. Что там? Отель, нахуй.
А вы туда? А вы возвращаетесь?
Мы дальше, да. Мы к пацанам идем на передок.
Плюс, мы
And we see them coming out of the bunkers now like meerkats and talking to each other.
Мы тут закрепляемся за вами двойками. Там двойка, тут.
When you see more soldiers have joined them in the position.
Может, и сегодня еще, блядь, на шашлычки вечером соберемся. Чизас?
And with that, that's the end of the clip, but once again showing the 3rd Brigade continuing on the offensives and the attacks down there in the southern direction of Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip and further on into the Donetsk region, where we also saw some Ukrainian tank commanders recounting the liberation of some Ukrainian villages in the Donetsk area. I don't really know where these are, to be honest with y'all, because we've never really seen any villages being liberated or taken in the Donetsk, but here's the clip. Ukrainian tank commanders recount 3-day shootout to liberate Donetsk villages. Multiple settlements were recaptured in mid-June. Oh my god, wait a minute, that's all the way down there. Wait a minute. There we go, and we're back to the clip. And we see the tank doing a special mowing operation or a clear-cutting operation. It was a 3-day shootout. Our assault had 3 stages. First, we pushed the Russian forces out of their positions in the woods. The enemy took up defensive positions in a village. They had prepared firing positions. Our mission was to approach and destroy them. Russian forces fired anti-tank rockets at relatively close ranges. We can see this right here. And there goes one. But here comes another. Oh, wait, they didn't show that one. It took a lot of character from our infantry and tankers to come that close to enemy positions. There are mines in the fields and roads. You have to stick out of the tank and constantly watch to give directions to the driver, which is very dangerous for a tank commander. They become a target for snipers. We were taking artillery fire at the same time. The tank unit cleared the way for the Ukrainian infantry. Literally, you can see them clearing the way right here in this clip. And there's the second RPG I was talking about earlier. There was actually an uninterrupted clip I saw before, and this RPG appears to have hit the side, but I couldn't tell if that was a glancing blow to the side or if it hit dead on the side. Couldn't really tell. When we see it hit the tank there, we stormed into the village and hurt the enemy. That's war. One of our tanks was hit, but thank God everyone is safe and sound. The soldier worked to remove the damaged tank from the battlefield. What are you doing, evacuating the tank? It's to be evacuated and repaired. Then it will return to action. If it's repairable, it'll be fixed. Wait, what were you doing? Like laughing at the guy giving the thumbs up there?
Yeah. He looks awkward doing that.
Yeah, he's like, no, he just goes back to working on it. Then it'll return to action. If it's repairable, it'll be fixed. If it's not repairable, it'll most likely be used for spare parts. Ukraine's counteroffensive continues to push forward. Hey, whipping out the SIG! An attempt to break through Russian positions along the front line. And with that, that's the end of that clip right there, but showing a little bit of the Ukrainian tankers in action near the area of Staromayorsk. With that, moving that clip on into its appropriate location, we actually didn't get any video footage from the Donetsk region today, but, you know, there are active days and there are inactive days. This is truly the Maginot Line if there was one at this point, and that's probably why we haven't seen any video or picture evidence coming out of that part of the front. Meanwhile, however, we did hear some pretty cool news from Portugal. Portugal will be providing some military support. They'll be providing 14 M113s, we can see one of them pictured here, and they'll also be providing 9 105mm howitzers. These are kind of old, not a lot of countries use them much anymore, but still, some support is better than no support, and it's great to know that the Portuguese will be providing support to the Ukrainian armed forces and helping them in this war. Even if it's a small way, every little bit counts. And so on that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And without further ado, here is the speech. Speech! Why in the world do we always do that? Anyways, let me unmute this and get the subtitles there, and here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Короткий звіт за цей день. Передусім я дякую нашим повітряним силам та усім захисникам неба з інших наших сил оборони за кожну збиту російську ракету, за кожен збитий шахет. Тільки за минулу ніч понад 30 збитих шахедів – це сотні врятованих життів. Це врятована інфраструктура. Дякую, воїни. Друге, сьогодні в Херсоні внаслідок обстрілу окупантів постраждали рятувальники. Вони займалися ліквідацією наслідків російського теракту на Каховський ГЕС і були обстріляні російською ж артилерією. 8 співробітників ДСНС були поранені. Один, на жаль, загинув. Мої співчуття рідним і близьким. Українські воїни обов'язково дадуть відповідь терористам на всю цю підлість. Кожен такий російський удар, кожен російський теракт – це щоразу аргумент, що немає і не буде в окупантів ніяких шансів залишитись десь на українській землі. Вбивцям і терористам тут місця немає і ніколи не буде. Зараз наші воїни на півдні, на сході дуже активно знищують ворога, фізично очищуючи Україну, і так буде і надалі. Захист від терору – це знищення терористів. І це гарантування, що у держави зла більш ніколи не буде можливості привнести зло в Україну. Власне, про це третій пункт за сьогодні. Вже почались перші зустрічі в Лондоні в рамках конференції з відбудови України, яку ми готували разом з британськими друзями. Вже відбулись дискусії з Швейцарії та Німеччини, у Франції та Італії. Є робота різного рівня заради нашого відновлення, і ми спрямовуємо цю роботу так, щоб наша відбудова, наше відновлення стали не лише проектами будівництва, а глобальним проектом захисту. Відбудована Україна, трансформована Україна, зміцнена Україна – це носій безпеки і гарант безпеки. Це захищеність від будь-яких форм російського терору і захист від будь-яких повторень російської агресії. Завтра на лондонській конференції представлю частину аспектів нашої філософії трансформації України. Повний же сенс буде представлений пізніше цього місяця і вже в Україні. Я разом з партнерами і всі разом тут, вдома, в Україні, ми маємо гарантувати, що після нас для України лише безпека, лише свобода, лише мир. Я дякую всім, хто воює і працює заради України. Я дякую кожному нашому воїну, який зараз в бою, на бойових постах, бойових завданнях. Запоріжжя, Донеччина, ви молодці, хлопці. Дякую всім, хто тренує наших воїнів і хто нам допомагає зброєю. Кожну одиницю зброї, кожен снаряд України використовуємо максимально ефективно і завжди для захисту життя. Слава Україні!
And with that,
And hear 'em Slava.
and Slava Ukraini. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on the 482nd day of the war. And of course, that was a pretty good speech. And also, speaking of pretty good speeches, a lot of y'all have been giving speeches about some of the questions we've been asking during tonight's poll segment. A lot of y'all have had some very interesting inputs on this, and not only have voted on y'all's opinions in those polls, but y'all have also talked about them in the live chat as well, and I've been seeing some very interesting points on some of these questions. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew, for these questions?
All right, and moving back into our polls, our very first one says, Russia's new war tactic includes remotely detonating tanks packed with explosives, and what are your thoughts? 55% said that will be ineffective for Russia, 25% said they don't have enough tanks, 11% said that will be effective, and 9% said unsure. And to me, very clearly, Russia does not have the tanks to be sacrificing to be doing this tactic, so I'm with the 25%. They simply don't have enough equipment. Also, they probably don't have enough explosives either to be packing that much into a single tank. It also makes the tank a rolling absolute suicide tank, basically, because the soldiers driving it are at extreme peril for getting hit and blown up even worse than they would have in the first place. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's not a smart move at all, considering we've never seen one of those succeed yet. They always get destroyed and blown up before they make it to their targets. And also, it appears that the Russian crews don't survive the mission. So I would say it's just stupid all around. They don't have the manpower, the tanks, nor the ammo or explosives to really spare for these kinds of stupid and useless attacks that don't really end up getting any kind of results. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next poll says the U.S. breaks silence and says that the Russian tactical nuclear threat is real and worrying. And what are your thoughts? 51% said it's true, the threat is real. 27% said, no, the boy cried wolf too much this time. 12% said unsure, and 10% said false. Russia's nukes are in disrepair. And even though Putin has greatly overused the nuclear threat, I don't think we can completely write it off only because of that reason. They probably do have at least one or two working nukes. I'd imagine that most of them are probably in disrepair. But when it comes to nukes, just one is a extremely concerning subject. So to me, I'm on the 51%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be I would have to say that it's probably a large concern. I honestly think they probably have maybe 100 intercontinental ballistic missiles that are operational at the minimum. Although that seems pretty high, they do have around, I think, 7,000 or 9,000 of them. So it's an incredibly small number out of all of those nuclear weapons. but that is still concerning enough to create a bit of an issue. But still, it's not all 9,000 of their nuclear weapons that are operational, because much like their army, none of their tanks are really operational. There's only a small percentage of them that are. And I have a feeling that that's probably also the same for the nuclear weapons as well. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one while Matthew slams a bot. And he slammed that thing into the concrete. The teeth are gone. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says, the U.S. says China is trying to establish a training facility in Cuba, and negotiations are underway. And what are your thoughts? 50% said it's a repeat of the Cuban crisis. 20% said, it seems serious but tame. 18% said it's only posturing, no worries. And 12% said unsure and undecided. And on this one, I will be with the 50%, 100%, if that makes any sense. This seems like a complete repeat of the Cuban Missile Crisis in another form. Cuba is one of these places that's so close to Florida. It is a huge threat when something starts going down like that. Especially, they already have a spying base down there. Now they're trying to add a training base and probably add some weaponry to it as well that can strike the United States even closer. So very concerning, and we should address that very quickly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it is quite concerning. I'm not really liking the idea of a Russian base being anywhere in Cuba. They actually have one right now, but I think it's only a refueling base. And let me check to see if that's true. Russian base in Cuba. Let's see. Facility located near Cuba, largest facility of its kind, operated by Soviet and later Russian foreign intelligence services outside of Russia. So I believe they still have one. Nope, actually it's gone. It went away in 2002. So they don't have a base at the moment, but they did have one all the way up until 2002. I would still say that's very concerning, however, that Russian forces could end up securing a base in Cuba. It's not like Cuba is a really advanced or modern country. It's not really like the Russians are a really advanced or modern country either, but having a foreign adversary inside of the Gulf of Mexico like that is quite concerning, to say the least, or more so the Caribbean. It's very concerning. I think we might need to possibly talk about actions needed to ensure that that does not happen, including, man, I was hearing, Matthew, that there was an amazing bay with beautiful beaches, but for some reason they call it the Bay of Pigs. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's because there's a whole bunch of pigs there or what, but maybe we need to go down.
Go ahead.
And maybe we need to go down there and just make sure that the Bay of Pigs is all right.
I was about to say that I hope that tragedy that happened with the Bay of Pigs doesn't prevent the United States from doing something again this time. That might make them apprehensive to go down there and put a stop to it. But I'm not saying to repeat the crisis, but we need to do something to put an end to that, because we can't have them that close to Florida. That would be extremely risky.
I would certainly agree. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And by the way, if y'all ever want any summer vacation plans, join the Army, and maybe you'll have a vacation at the Bay of Pigs. Very beautiful place, wonderful beaches. Well, actually, I'm sorry. That's only reserved for Cubans. For some reason, we said, you know what? Wait a minute, JFK said something like, I'm having a real big problem with sending in the U.S. Army. And the CIA said, what? No, it's not the Army. We'll be using Cubans. And then JFK went, all right, I'm fine with that then. Send them. It's like, what?
Bring back some cigars next time.
Bring back some cigars. Send them back to Jordan Marsh. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, after much support for Taiwan, the U.S. now says it does not support Taiwanese independence. And what are your thoughts? 61% said that's awful, terrible decision. 17% said unsure. 18% said understandable but unfortunate. And 5% said that's great, it's not our fight. And I don't think there has been a more irritating thing that I've ever seen come out of this country in a long time. That is a terrible decision. That's awful. We basically goaded the Taiwanese into thinking that we'll be there to help them out in case something breaks out. We've been sailing our ships through the Taiwan Strait. We've been sending messages to China, telling them basically to leave them alone. And now we're going to basically abandon them. We also said we would not get involved in a conflict between China and Taiwan, which is also another backpedaling. So I am firmly within the 61%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm firmly within that 61% as well. I don't like the idea of leaving the Taiwanese high and dry. And I've been seeing this, that a lot of people are going, well, that's always been our policy. No, it has not. Because if you've been here with us and you've been covering this news like it has been in the background on this channel, that has not been our position over the past year. Over the past year, we have been providing arms to the Taiwanese. We've been offering military assistance. Hell, we even sent a carrier task force to the area of Taiwan when the People's Liberation Army Navy was conducting exercises around the island, and we said if anything serious started to happen, we would step in. We've been doing all kinds of things to show that we are clearly invested in the sovereignty and the independence of Taiwan, completely separate from the Republic of China, well, the People's Republic of China on the mainland. It's silly to sit there and try and reverse that now, especially putting out such a clear message to both the Taiwanese and the People's Republic of China, and sit there and go from protecting their sovereignty and protecting their independence, then now we're going to act like they aren't even a legitimate country. And I know a lot of y'all are saying, but we've been saying that for a while. But the problem is we need to come up with some kind of a clear answer on this thing, because this is getting incredibly complicated, so much so that it's really even hard for us to do anything over there without making it seem like we're completely thwarting half of our policies. We either support the Republic of China or we support the People's Republic of China. I honestly think we should support the Republic of China in this incident, because it revolves around, in supporting their independence, revolves around further Chinese containment. We have to stop the Chinese from growing the Belt and Road program to where it will be a force to be reckoned with. The Taiwanese are a key aspect in that factor. Not only are the semiconductor productions and factories inside of Taiwan incredibly important, but its strategic position as an island near mainland China is also incredibly important to us. If we lose that, we practically lose all control and all holdings around the area of the South China Sea. All we'll have left is Guam and Okinawa, and that is it. That's all we'll have. And then also Japan and South Korea. But those are practically geographically isolated from the South China Sea. And then we'll have to rely either on trying to bring the Philippines back into the fold, or we'll just have to pray that nothing bad happens down there and they don't end up dredging up some more islands and claiming that they're real islands, which they've been doing. This is just not a smart move to me to say that to the People's Republic of China. Sure, I know they're saying they're trying to ease tensions, but that's a kind of statement that ends up throwing countries like Taiwan, which are our allies, under the bus and leaving them high and dry. And on top of that, well, how in the world can we say, I don't even know how we're saying it, that we're not friends with the Taiwanese when most of their military uses U.S. equipment? They're using M60s that the U.S. provided. They have Patriot air defense systems that the U.S. provided. A lot of their stuff is American provided. The Chinese...
we were just over there doing military exercises with them to help them shore up their defenses.
Yeah, and it just does not make any sense to me. And, of course... Many people will be saying, well, it's all part of just trying to keep the peace over there. That's no way to keep the peace. That is appeasement. And we can see that that did not work for Chamberlain in Europe during the 30s. It will not work for us now. The Chinese are a massive threat to this country. They are growing each and every year, and they are becoming far more of a serious threat to us, and they're also trying to expand their sphere of influence to have an indomitable hold over the Indian Ocean. If they get that control over the Indian Ocean, there will be no way for us to usurp the Chinese as a strong power that will be able to crush the rights and freedoms of people around the world without really any control, because they will hold most of the power in that area, and there will be no way to break up that power once they succeed. So that's my opinion on it. Don't really like the way the Chinese are going. I don't really like that policy with Taiwan. And I think that we should go and reverse that and go back to what we've been doing for the past year and say we are 100% with the Taiwanese. And so with that.
And also, I see some folks saying that they can't quite believe it. I'll be honest with you, I didn't quite believe it either. It was so shocking to me that I had to do a little bit more looking on it. But Blinken did say that out of his own mouth. And also, he said that we would not come in and aid Taiwan in the event of a war breaking out. So it's definitely documented. So you can look it up for yourself. It's real. One interesting thing, though, is today, about 2 hours ago, after all those statements were made by Blinken, then the president came out and called Xi Jinping a dictator and made some really offhanded remarks about him. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that, but it's very concerning to say we're going to basically abandon Taiwan.
It's very concerning. And I saw someone say in the live chat, man, I'm very disappointed in that. Listen, if you're disappointed in that, you don't know who the Chinese are. The Chinese are China as a country is one of the, if you think the Russians are barbaric, wait until you see what the Chinese do. I'll say this, the Russians are barbaric, sure, but they don't run camps. China does. I'm not going to go into that specifically here, but if you've not heard about those camps, pull them up. They're a real deal. And that is something that is a whole other kind of evil. That is truly a Nazi-level kind of evil right there, and they're doing it right now in plain sight of everyone around the world, and we just act like it doesn't happen. And we're saying, oh, we ought to give concessions to these people. That's not a good idea, because if you give concessions to those people and you let them grow their power, they're going to end up trying to bring that stuff around the world wherever it may benefit them. And that is nothing we need. That's nothing that is good at all. Not from just a moral level, but from a standard of living level, that is pretty rough. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are all out of poll questions. So we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $175 donation from Mark, the incompetent drone operator. And he is now in New Zealand. I think that's the land of Kiwi, isn't it?
That's the land of the Kiwi Boyd, which I love the
land
Kiwi
of
Boyd.
Kiwi. Yes, I do. Pull up a picture of one, please.
Kiwi Boyd. I'm going to pull up that Kiwi picture of the Kiwi bird that has it cut open and is a Kiwi. Oh, look, they actually have a picture of a Kiwi bird by Kiwis. But there it is, the precious Kiwi bird.
Oh, there's one cut open with the Kiwi, like you just mentioned, right there in the chart.
Yeah, look at that. It's a Kiwi.
That's kind of odd, but anyways, getting back to Mark's super chat, he says maybe Pentagon accounting can miscode a bunch of nukes, apologize to Putin. Hey, bro, genuine error. The enforcer was head of accounting. Trust me. Or the codes were taped to it so they weren't lost.
Oh my lord, Mark. I thank you for the massive amount of support. I'm going to have to stop you right there, though. Nobody needs me to be in charge of accounting anything. I think I could probably do a better job than whoever's doing the accounting right now in the Pentagon, but it would still be billions off. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And thank you so much once again for throwing my mathematical skills under the bus, but I'm not going to lie, they're very bad. They're terrible. And maybe we could do something like that. I have a feeling they wouldn't be too happy about that miscoding, but sometimes they just got to roll with the punches. Sometimes they just got to be unhappy with stuff. The world isn't a perfect place. And they'll just have to live with it. And also, hopefully we will tape the codes to it as well, because we never want to lose the codes. The codes are very important, and I think that we certainly need to ensure that the codes are kept in safekeeping for the world entire. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running, and helping this thing to keep on going each and every day. And also, I have to say that it's cool to know that you're back in New Zealand. New Zealand is practically on the other side of the world relative to the United States, both latitudinally and longitudinally. It pretty much seems to be on the entire other side of the world. And it's really cool to know that you're down there. I hope you're having a fun time in New Zealand. And also, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. It's massive support, and we are completely blown away, Mark, that you support this channel that massively. You help us to be able to do this as a job, and help us to be able to do this for 100 hours a week combined every single day of the year. Every single week of the year, more so. And thank you so much once again for helping to make that possible, and appreciating this channel enough to support it like that, because it really flatters us when people support us that greatly and help us to be able to keep this thing rolling. And with that, I'm trying to sit here and think, because I could go on a whole spiel, and I don't know if folks like speeches like that, where we go through the whole spiel and everything, because I don't want to sound like a broken record. But at the same time, we do want folks to understand that we greatly appreciate y'all for supporting this channel, because y'all are the only way we can run. We don't have ads, we don't have sponsors, we don't have memberships, we have nothing but y'all. And if y'all enjoy this channel and support it, we want y'all to know that we're greatly appreciative of y'all's support, because y'all make it possible for us to continue on our work in covering the news in Ukraine and helping them out. And I got to thank y'all a whole load for that, because it does mean a lot to us. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is a very generous $100 donation from Dutch Arjen. And thank you so much for that support, and also being a longtime channel viewer as well, Dutch. And they said, Ukraine may be doing limited gains offensive strategy, excellent against defense in depth. Read about it a year ago, slow but effective. It nibbles away at defenses spread out in depth, and Russia is arrayed to defend against large armored thrust that may come later. And to add on to the super chat, Russia has a bunch of isolated trenches and fortifications forward to absorb and slow an armored thrust, and Russia must do this because Ukraine's large armored force.
And I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Dutch Argin, and thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And they may be doing something like that. That's why I started to move back from my assumptions of how this offensive would go, and I just kind of left it as it is, because I'm not really one to say anymore how this thing is going to roll. We saw blitzkriegs pretty much occurring up till this point, and now we're starting to see these slow-rolling advances that are a part of an entirely separate doctrine, one in which we have not seen used in this war so far. And so I would certainly agree with you. I think it is a limited gains offensive that they're trying to conduct at the moment. I think they'll eventually convert over into their blitzkrieg style offensive once they reach a certain point, but I have a feeling we'll be seeing this kind of limited gains offensive here for quite a while before we ever see any kind of blitzkrieg attempts. So with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, Dutch Argin, because it means a lot to us that folks like you throw in very interesting inputs like that and also support this channel to help us to keep this thing rolling, because it is, you know, and I hate to say this over and over again, but I do want y'all to know how greatly appreciative we are that y'all decide to support this channel. Y'all help us to keep this thing rolling as a job. Y'all actually help us to be able to pay our bills behind the scenes, rent and all that stuff. And if it wasn't for folks like you, Dutch Argin, it wouldn't be possible for us to keep this thing rolling like we do. Because it is, you know, and regardless of what people want to say, because, you know, if any of y'all have been around the block, y'all know there's a whole bunch of stupid people out there. This is a job, you know, and we don't live on air. We have to pay rent, we have to eat, and none of that is paid for. We have to pay for all of that ourselves, and so this is full-on a job. And y'all who support us in the live chat there, y'all are the only way we're able to make this job work. And we're greatly appreciative to each and every one of y'all, because we are the ones we have to thank at the end of the day for being able to keep on going, to be able to do this as a job and not get another job where this has to end. And I got to thank you so much once again, Dutch Argin, and everyone else who supported us tonight for the support. And I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And also thank you greatly for the support, because without folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do this. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and our next super chat goes to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who puts in a $35 donation. And thank you very much, AMX, for that support. And he said, hi, live chat question, smiley.
Well, hello, and we will make sure to get a live chat question. And I thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, because once again, folks like you make this channel possible. If it wasn't for someone like you who was willing to support this channel, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, let's go grab a live chat in honor of that super chat. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to Curtis Long, who says, any news on the Russians mining the cooling towers at the nuclear power plant?
We have heard a little bit about it. We heard the Ukrainians claim that that did happen, but we don't really know how true it is. I would assume it's true, considering that they also claimed that the Russians had mined the Novokakhovka Dam, and they had. So I would say it's probably true that they've also mined the cooling plants at the CMPP. That may also be possible as well. But with that, I thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat, and I thank you for the support as well. I hope we address that the best we can. As far as we know, that would most likely be a valid claim based off of the validity of the Novokakhovka mining statement. And with that, thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a very generous $35 super chat from Duncan VR. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support, and also being a longtime channel viewer. And he does have the animal noises. He has a bunch. And of course, this is my favorite thing. He says, Bamuba, ba ba, bliat, bliat, ba ba. When I'm forced to do my business accounting, ba ba, bliat, moo, wah, wah. What's going on, ba ba, bliat? I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, Baba, bliat. Give Putin a wedge, Baba, with a grenade in his diaper, Baba, blue, bliat, moo.
And, well, I think you're the support.
The silence. Don't leave me hanging like that.
I was sitting there, I was like, oh. But I thank you so much for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because, of course, I cannot lie. Folks like you, Duncan, make this channel possible with all the Bamubas and Baba and the Boo Boo. And I gotta thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. You would not want me to do your accounting, though. People would be thinking that instead of cooking your books, I'm just burning your books. It would be bad. It would be terrible. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. I can't do any accounting. Oh, man, I'm telling you. It's terrible. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Duncan, and thank you for throwing in another memorable super chat, and of course, helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for being a longtime viewer of this channel. You are an old guard, and being around forever, and of course, enjoying the news here. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from none other than Charlie Nikhil, also longtime channel viewer and legend, and thank you, Charlie, for that support. He says, I haven't been able to catch the coverage live for a bit. Keep it up, guys, and slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Charlie, and enjoying the coverage and encouraging us to keep it up. We have been keeping this up nonstop, 6 days a week for 482 days, nonstop, with a million things going on in the background. And of course, that sounds like it's no big deal. Oh, you know, no big deal. But we went through college, doing max credits for most of that. In fact, all of that pretty much until about April, well, very late April, May, at this point. We've had 2 months of not going to college. Rather than that, we've been going to college nonstop. The both of us have max credits every semester. And a million other things that have been going on in the background. And on top of that, just parts of daily life, like getting ready to go to law school, applying to go to law school, taking the LSAT, that added on to everything else in the background that somehow we both did in the middle of running this thing. And I got to thank you so much for being around during all of that, Charlie, and supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because folks like you have made it possible for us to be able to run this show, so that way people can say that they enjoy it and want to see it keep on running. And I gotta thank you so much for that again. Also, it's cool to hear that you were able to drop by again. We still have your shirts, and our mom really liked the dry fit material. She was actually like, man, I need to get myself some of those shirts, and they are really good. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the shirts, for the support, and for helping this channel to keep on running, and for sticking with us this entire time, to be able to keep this thing rolling. It's really something that people have stuck around this long. It's wild, really, to me. And also, I got to thank all of y'all once again for helping this channel to run the way it does. No other channel runs the way we do. No channel runs all of their fundraisers through YouTube Give. No channel runs their support all through Super Chats. Nobody does that. We're the only ones who do. And I've got to thank everyone so much once again for making the unique way this channel runs possible, like you, Charlie, and giving us some very memorable stuff along the way, like the shirts, which was really cool. And I got to thank y'all all once again so much, because
Say it again, Enforcer.
I got you, man. I'm a broken record over. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. I'm a broken record. Oh, man. But still, thank you so much once again. Because, you know, and, you know, I'm trying to skirt around it, because whenever we get support and I go into these spills, I always feel like, you know, I've got to sit there and say something about that. But we have decided that we are just going to move on. And I heard something fairly interesting, because some of y'all may have been filled in on your own today about a little bit of drama that happened out there on the internet, because some people were spreading lies, and we had that cleared up. We have decided that someone out there, a YouTuber out there, who posted a community post today, I read it, and I have to agree with it. We are not going to be going into this drama and bullcrap anymore, because there are some channels out there that are wanting us to go into that hardcore, and we're not. We're going to move on from that. We're going to run this channel the way it is. We've been running this way for 482 days, and our entire focus has always been on covering the news in Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. And it bothers us a little bit whenever we hear what these people say, because regardless of how much we just try and blot them out and continue on doing what we do, there is always people coming over from over there and trying to tell us crap, or they are trying to direct something at us. We're just going to move on. And to reiterate something I heard today that was really good, the number one priority is to support Ukraine. And that's been our number one priority. I'm not going to change that. And while we got some stuff going on in the background with someone else who's decided that that's no longer the prerogative, we're just going to keep rolling. And they can say whatever they want. We don't care. We're just going to keep this thing going. And of course, I'm sure that is going to infuriate them, and we'll be hearing more about that tomorrow. But we're just going to move on. But with that, thank you once again for support, Charlie, and helping us to keep this thing rolling. Because without folks like you, this wouldn't be possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to, let's see here. Hold on just a second. Our next one goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. And she says, have you and the enforcers seen that crazy trench CQB video? I know you can't show it on your stream due to its video, but the last guy they got was most likely a military blogger. And I did hear about that, and I think the military blogger might have been some guy that was very well known.
Yeah, I did hear about that, actually. I actually saw that clip, and it's on my phone. I actually ended up saving that one because it was a bizarre one. And yes, I think that may have been War Gonzo. You know, a lot of people have been saying that. They're like, that looks like War Gonzo. And I was like, it kind of did look like War Gonzo. So, you know, I don't know. But with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And I did see the clip. I can say that. I'm not sure if that was War Gonzo, though. We'll have to see. But with that, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jillian, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Jillian, very much for that support. And they said hello. And hello to you. They said, Enforcer Matt, keep up the great work. And thank you both.
And thank you so much for the support. And hello. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, because it is viewers like you that make this channel possible. Y'all are the let's see, what's a good way to put it? I'm trying to find new ways to put it. That's why I'm always saying, I guess you could say, because I'm like, I guess you could say this, and I'm like trying to figure out new things to say. Y'all keep this thing rolling. If I had to say what y'all are the steam to the engine, or the gas to the car. Y'all help to keep this thing rolling with y'all's support, and help us to be able to do this as a whole-time job. We don't have anything hidden in the background where we get supported by some magical fairy dust like ads or sponsors or anything like that. Y'all are the front line of the support to this channel, and it means a lot to us that folks do appreciate this channel enough to help this thing to keep on rolling. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And hello. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, big shout out to BC. Excuse me. Goodness. Big shout out to BC Skyman, who puts in a 20, as well as Rustin Rot, who also puts in a 20. BC puts in another 20, and all three of those super chats sadly don't have comments attached to them. But thank you very much, BC and Rustin Rot, for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much, both BC Skyman and Rustin Rot. And you know, Matthew, Rustin Rot is BC Skyman's mortal enemy because of his vintage car collection begins to rust and rot. BC Skyman will be very unhappy.
Yes.
But I gotta thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I've still gotta say, I am so jealous of the Mat 49 and the car collection. Like, that stuff is so cool, and I gotta tell you, you've got some amazing stuff over there. And also, Rustin Rot, I gotta thank you for being an old guard on this channel, much like BC Skyman, and both of y'all supporting this channel tonight and helping it to keep on rolling. And so thank you to both of y'all so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one. While Matthew is getting choked up. Damn, I'm getting choked
he is.
up. But with that, thank you to both of y'all once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Chase Matty, who puts in a $15 donation, and thank you very much, Chase, for that support. He says, patience. Like last year's Herzen counteroffensive, I predict this year's will take pressure and small offensives along the front all summer, resulting in a breakthrough by fall and winter. And what are your thoughts?
Thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm actually gonna have to have you reread that because I had an answer lined up and then I heard thoughts and that threw me off. So can you reread that again?
He says, patience. Like last year's Herzen counteroffensive, I predict this year's will take pressure and small offensives along the front all summer, resulting in a breakthrough by fall and winter. And thoughts?
I have a feeling we might see something happen by fall, and I would agree with you. I think it's going to be small probing offensives until the fall comes, and then we'll finally see some real progress being made. And so with that, I got to thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and I would largely agree with that. We're probably going to see some pretty slow progress for a while, and then we may see it just go full throttle, it seems, by fall or winter. Although winter would be pretty tough and fall would also be pretty tough. Winter would be tough just because of the temperature. Fall would be tough because Rasputitsa will once again be here. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Laura Carr, who puts in a $10 donation. Thank you, Laura, very much for the support. And I did grab a Ricola, by the way, but it's not working very fast. Laura said, have y'all thought about hiring a cameraman to help with your studio streams? Also wanted to say I enjoy story time. Throw in another one from time to time. Slow Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support and enjoying story time, which is a small side note, a rabbit hole. We've actually really been able to contain rabbit holes quite well lately. That used to be a big part of this channel, and they've slowly faded away due to large amounts of letters being written to the studio, and so I eventually had to just phase most of the rabbit holes out. But I'm glad you do enjoy them whenever I rarely get to go into them nowadays. And I gotta thank you so much as well for appreciating this channel and enjoying it a great deal. Also, Matthew, could you reread the first part again to make sure I heard it correctly?
The first part of that one said, have y'all thought about hiring a cameraman?
Hiring a cameraman? I would say, yes, we have, actually. But then at the same time, we went, eh. The reason being that we don't have a cameraman is I'm a bit, well, actually, Matthew and me are a bit of a perfectionist as far as the camera goes. And while it would be nice to have a camera person, at the same time, want to make sure that we are in control of the cameras. Because if we gave it over to someone remotely, who's to say that one night the camera just doesn't get changed at all and we have no way to really fix that during that show, and it's just stuck on someone because they just kind of like wandered off or something like that. So, you know, that would be a cool idea, but we would largely just keep the camera switching to me. And so that way I could sit there and do 3.5 hours of monologuing and then also flip around cameras at the same time. But still, with that, thank you so much for the support. Pretty cool idea, but we most likely would probably not do that. And with that, thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to that guy who puts in a $10 donation. And sadly, we can't read off the super chat because it would bring up the forbidden topic. But that guy, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you for the support. Like Matthew said, it's a forbidden topic. We are not going to be mentioning that anymore. We're not going to be mentioning anyone anymore. Our whole goal, and this is the thing that's changed recently, during this entire war, our focus has been on Ukraine. And it's always been about Ukraine. It's always been about supporting Ukraine, helping Ukraine, and covering the news of what's going on there practically every day. And over the past few months, due to constant harassment from that particular person, our normal focus of always covering Ukraine has started to shift from covering Ukraine to also having to respond to whatever the hell that guy has decided to say today. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And also, you know, if anyone, and I saw one thing in there, if anyone has an issue with what's going on in the background, that's largely our issue to deal with. That's a problem between us and well, us and him, and I don't know why viewers, regardless, you know, whether they dislike our position on that or like it, I don't know why many people feel like that is something they have to hop into and get involved on. That is purely...
In other words, we want to deal with this issue man to man and not, you know, drag everybody and their dog into this fight, because it's not everyone's fight.
Yeah, it's not everyone's fight. That's also why you don't see our channel trying to run around to everyone on YouTube and, you know, trying to have them join a side or split the community. We're not trying to split the Ukraine war community. The Ukraine war community is out there doing its own thing, helping Ukraine. We're having a problem with a specific person, and we want to deal with that on the side and just get it done and over with. And, you know, and then some people will say, oh, you know, but yeah, anyways, yeah, you got a good point, Matthew. We'll move on from that. We're already getting into it a little bit too much again. But with that, thank you once again for the support. Sadly, we can't really cover that, but I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from 0 Point. And also, welcome to the LSA 0 Point, because I saw that you said you were new. And thank you very much. And they said, hello, Enforcer and Matt. I've been watching your stream for about 2 weeks now, and I love it. I have a less serious question, more goofy. And we like those, like Coltonberg said earlier. Or I think it was Activista, actually. And they said, what, in your opinion, would be the best chicken strips, and why?
Best chicken
The
strips.
chicken tender in Ukraine.
I'll get out of here. But I would say the best chicken tender. I actually don't eat a lot of chicken tenders, to be honest with you. I would say the best one, though, is Raising Cane's chicken tenders. Those are pretty good. What do you think, Matthew?
I say those are pretty good. Zaxby's is okay. That's what we have locally. We don't have Raising Cane's here locally. That's in Mississippi. Yeah, I would say probably your choice too.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's the best because it's juicy, it's tender, it's got great flaky crust to it. I mean, like, if you ever get Raisin Cane's, I just think that's really the standard as far as chicken tenders go. You just can't really top that on a normal basis. So I hope that answers that question fairly well. And also, thank you so much for the support. And also, having only watched for 2 weeks, it is pretty wild whenever we hear about someone new watching our stream, and especially if someone new who supports the channel, because usually our supporters are longtime supporters who have been helping this channel to keep on running practically since the beginning of the channel. And it's really cool to know that new people come in every once in a while and also support the channel and help us to keep it running, because folks like you make it possible for us to be able to run this thing like we have been over the past 2 weeks. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that did address that the best we could. And let's see. Alabama Cajun said Zaxby's is nasty. I can kind of
I'll
get
admit,
behind
some
that.
days it's nasty. Some days, and some days make it right.
I can kind of get behind that, honestly. It is kind of bad every once in a while. And let's see. Has anyone else been saying anything? Let's see. Bud's Chicken and Fish, sewn in SoFlo, hits. Hits? You're telling me that thing's conducting physical abuse? But anyways, I'm just playing. But with it, thank you once again for the support. Hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for asking a really funny question. And I hope that answered it fairly well in all seriousness. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Eduardo Guerra. Sorry about that. Who puts in a $5 donation and says, "Greetings from Mexico City, LSA spy in Mexico City."
Hey, thank you so much for the support all the way from Mexico City, which is in the middle of, well, not really in the middle, it's more in the south of Mexico, but really cool. And I got to thank you so much once again for being a Lee Spring Army soldier all the way in Mexico City and supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. Folks like you make it possible. And I got to thank you once again for helping us out and being able to do this as a day-to-day grind. I mean, man, do we on the grind all the time. But with that, thank you once again.
Time 99.
Walk with your boys. We make it look easy. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for being a Lee Spring Army viewer from Mexico.
And also saw Rob say, "Next time we hear the enforcer say fairly well, take a shot of tequila."
Tequila?
Tequila. Yeah.
Oh my god! Wait a minute.
I don't know
Back
what happened.
up!
I'm
Back
having a
up!
stroke.
Hold up! Stop! I had a shot of tequila. 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 The rapper Tequila. But anyway, with that, we are on to the next. I got to be honest with you, Matthew. That was pretty memorable. It sounds like you already took a shot of tequila, based on how you tried to pronounce it.
Interesting name. I don't say that very often. I'm not an alcoholic.
Look, I sat there and got in a fight with an armadillo. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from CK Bold, who says, "Take a live chat question." And of course, we will, CK, like usual, and thank you for the support. And the question goes to, let's see here, it goes to Richard Rohde, who says, "Would that Ford F-250 with the M777 behind it be something you two could drive in on the 4th of July parade in Birmingham?" I mean, it could. It could. I don't know how we'd be received driving in a weapon of destruction quite like that, but the Ford would be well received. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say maybe. Honestly, I would be kind of a little concerned about the psycho killers that are possibly in the crowd, because there are people in Alabama that I've seen giving messages of, "Don't worry, the Enforcer will be off YouTube for a while. That'll be arranged." And I'm in Alabama, and I go, "Oh, my 44 Magnum. Oh man." But I don't know about being in a parade, honestly, because that would be far too many people standing on the side of the street, having to drive by them. It would practically be like us being in a moving target in a shooting gallery. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. It's not a bad idea, though. Beyond the shooting gallery thing, it wouldn't be that bad of an idea. It's just that there are psycho lunatic people out there, and you can't find any better level of psycho lunatic people than here in America. Being completely honest, I've never seen people as crazy as some of the crazy people are in America. I think they really take the cake from just about every other country. You can find some of the most reasonable people in America, some of the most reasonable people in the world, but on the same hand, you can find the craziest psycho, bloodlusting, nutty people out there who just think that their option one of their options in life is to just kill people they disagree with, which is just loony. But anyways,
Crazy.
crazy, kind of crazy. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for support, and I hope that does address that fairly well.
All right, and up next we have a $2 super chat from Jason Carpenter, who says, "Hi guys, great show tonight, and I hope everyone is well." And we're well for now. Thank you, Jason.
And we're well for now, Jason. I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I can assure you that we are fine right now. The heart's beating. The eyes are glazed. I'd like it because I don't have my glasses on. That came out so badly. It sounds like I'm drunk. I don't have my glasses on, so everything just looks like it's glazed beyond like 3 or 4 feet. Everything's just blurry. But, you know, it's fine rather than that. So thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, Jason. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling.
All right, and our next one goes to Jason Carpenter yet again. He made a second comment with a $2 donation. He said, "You guys do a great job, and we appreciate you both." And thank you, Jason, for the second kind words of support. You're spoiling us.
And thank you, Jason. You're really killing us over here. You're killing us like those people in the parade.
I'm telling you, I'm getting so much respect.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. I was in a parade the other day. Everyone treated me like a shooting target. Oh, man, bullets were flying. But anyways, thank you once again for the kind words, Jason, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this possible. And I've got to thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel enough to support us and also give us words of encouragement. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and our next one goes to David Malone, who puts in a 2 and says, "Long live the LSA and Slava Ukraine."
And long live the LSA and Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope we addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $4 super chat from Spirits, who says, "We got you, and I appreciate falling asleep to these, Ukraine."
And I thank you so much for the support. I thank you for having us. I thank you for. I'll have 2 enforcers, please, on the rocks.
Enforcer, I think we've been had.
What do you mean?
Well, he said, "We got you."
We got you. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Oh, you didn't get it. He said, "We got you." You know how you say, "Oh, we've been had." Well, he had us.
Oh, okay. That one went right over.
That went over your head.
That one went right over my head. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. Matthew sent my blood pressure through the roof right there. I thought we had just been had on stream, and I was about to be like, "Get that man and exile him." But still, thank you once again for the support and having this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible. And I thank you so much for enjoying it enough to also support it as well and make it possible for us to do this as a job. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $2 super chat from Chris Webb, who puts in something in Ukrainian. I know what part of it says. It says Slava Ukraine. I think the rest says Hiram Slava, but let me double check. He says, "Thanks to," I can't pronounce that in English, I mean.
American.
Thanks to Dilanola Vivna. Glory to Ukraine, Coffee Fund.
And thank you so much for the support, Slava Ukraini. And we will make sure to put that towards the coffee fund. We need coffee as much as people need air. Especially at this time of night, it takes a lot of coffee to keep this thing rolling. Matty can tell you, I've gotten to about the point where I drink about 10 fluid ounces of cold brew. I don't even know how many milligrams of caffeine that is at this point. I just know that that's what I need to survive through the night. And I gotta thank you so much for supporting the coffee fund, because the coffee is disappearing quicker and quicker these days, and it's not getting any better. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 2 and says, "Slava Ukraine."
And thank you for the support, Dupper Bob. Slava Ukraini. And thank you for always supporting this channel every single day. It helps this thing to keep on rolling, and without folks like you, it wouldn't be possible for us to do this as a job. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to that guy who puts in a $4 donation and says, "Hell yes, you be you. And let's face it, if it don't pay, it goes away."
And thank you for the support. No, I don't like it being put that way, because if something did happen where YouTube demonetized us, we probably would be able to run this thing for a couple, maybe 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3, maybe 4 months before we actually had to do something to support ourselves, again. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And that is true, as far as the super chats go. It's the only way the channel is supported. And so, if we didn't get super chats, it's not like, other YouTube channels where it goes, oh, they can survive on memberships or, AdSense. We don't have any of that. It just doesn't run. And that's pretty wild, because when you look at our viewership, and we've gotten 3.1 million views over the past 28 days, not a single cent is made from viewership. It's just made off of folks who decide that they enjoy the channel and would like to support it. And we actually, anyways, that's a whole story on its own. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing going. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next we have a $2 super chat from Dubsy Dabster, who says, Capybara, I pull up, Capybara.
Thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Dubsy Dabster, because that Capybara will help us to keep this thing rolling. And did y'all know capybaras be cute?
Somewhat. They're kind of like giant, oversized rats, but they're like interesting at the same time.
I pull up, capybara.
They seem kind of studious. That's why I think people like them.
Man, I like this thing just because it's silly. Look at that thing.
I'm not gonna lie, if you saw one in person, you might think it was a little nasty or something.
I mean, maybe. I'm not gonna lie. I pull up, capybara babies. But anyways,
those things are strong too. I've seen them tear a pin up.
Man, I showed you that clip too, man. And that guy sat there. That guy sat there and went, "Oh wow!" And then that thing ripped apart their whole house in like 5 seconds. But anyways, with that, hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you once again for the support, Dubsy Dabster, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we're moving into our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight we had Mark Hodges, Cfay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Bernew, and Paul Schultz. They always reliably decode the Morse code, unlike my speaking. They said tonight's Morse code cipher says Ukraine is warming up the offensive and probing hard for the next push.
And that is the sound of money. Y'all just hit the jackpot, and that is the correct Morse code message. Hopefully they will be able to conduct that massive offensive that they're talking about here soon, and of course, I hope that they are successful in that. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you all for deciphering the Morse code message on the 482nd day of the war. And of course, it means a lot to us that y'all have been able to do that every single day without fail and get the message correct every single time. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our first question from the live chat goes to Plexus Gaming, who says, did you guys see the latest story from the Mosquito drones?
Mosquito drones. I don't think we have, actually. I would have to declare ignorance on that. And so with that, hope that does address that the best I can, which means I have nothing to really address about that. And with that, I don't mean that to be rude. And someone's going to sit there, look, he's so rude. No, I just literally don't even know about that to even talk about it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Enforcer for President, who says, I heard Russian soldiers are getting sick again, and what's the dealio? Cheerio.
And the deal, homie, is that they're getting cholera from bad water. And that seems to be a problem that's starting to spread around in the Crimean and Kherson area under Russian occupation, and soldiers are starting to fall under great illness because of that. So that is what we've heard at the moment, and that's the only disease we know of that is really having a massive outbreak. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is from PR Beck, who says, some say that nuclear reactor cooling lines have been mined by the same man that mined the dam. Isn't it time for NATO to get off its butt and do something?
Yes, I would say so. We've been saying that on this channel for a good while, that the Enherdar situation or the ZNPP situation is so bad, someone needs to get involved immediately, but for some reason no one is. And that is really kind of annoying me, considering how serious of a situation that is, and we're just going to kind of let that roast in the background until it explodes. And so with that, hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to, let's see, James Lynn, who says, it sounds like War Gonzo was taken out in the trench yesterday on the filmed gunfight with Ukrainian SOF, and what are your thoughts?
We did hear that. I did see the video. He may have been knocked out. Well, not knocked out. He may have gone to the other
Nap.
side. Yeah, he may have been napping out there, taking a nice big nap. So, yeah, I think that may have been him, but we haven't really got exact confirmation yet. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Chris Cooper, who says, "Whatever happened to the LPR and DPR?"
What happened to the LPR and DPR is that they still exist, but they're largely annexed provinces within the Russian Federation at this point, and that's really all we know. We also don't really hear their units being differentiated much from regular Russian forces now, and I'm not really sure if the Russian army has absorbed the DPR and LPR into them. We didn't hear any specific news about that happening, but we don't really hear a lot of specific mentions about DPR or LPR soldiers like we did at the beginning of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, if anyone's curious, I saw somebody bring it up in the live chat earlier about that submarine that was going down to look at the Titanic. I just saw a story that just came across my screen that said banging sounds heard during search for missing sub on Tuesday, says the U.S. So I'm no expert, but that seems to suggest that maybe it's caving in on itself or it's about to implode. But that doesn't sound good. But Enforcer, what say you?
That could be several things. That could have been them banging on the side of their sub. That could have been the sub imploding. That could have been anything. It's, that's really hard to tell. But one thing I will say, and I'll be quite honest with you all here, it's unfortunate to hear that the submarine's going down, but I don't really know who thought it was a smart idea to get into what's practically a homemade submarine and go 2.5 miles under the water to the point that most military, well, in fact, no military submarines can go that deep. They would implode far before they got there, and then control the entire thing with an Xbox controller and hope that it works.
It was a PlayStation controller, actually.
It was a Logitech controller. And I don't know. I don't know who in the hell thought that was a smart idea. I've got to be completely honest with y'all, and I think that was a really stupid thing to do. That's just my honest opinion. So if they did something dumb where they put themselves into so much trouble that they ended up winning Darwin Awards down there, that just is what it is. And I see Angry Penguin say they do it all the time. 250,000 seat. That's true too, but I just don't I get one thing being on the glass bottom boats where you can see down into the ocean or whatever. That's neat and all. But things like that, I just don't think people understand the kind of pressures that a submersible undergoes at 2.5 miles under the surface. It's something that is completely out of the realm of logic. It would be like sending people up into a homemade rocket into space and hoping that works. But
they signed the waiver, though.
Yeah, man. I mean, and I just gotta be honest with
you.
The
waiver of liability. They can't mess up and sue over that.
I mean, they can't. They kind of can't, really. At least in a small way.
Really, if they signed a waiver, they really can't. Seriously, though, the estate can't sue over it typically. So if they're lost, they're kind of screwed over that one.
Yeah, and that's just one thing to me. It's like, if you have to sign one of those waivers to be able to spend $250,000 to sit in a seat for a few hours, to put your life into great danger like that, I honestly don't really have a lot of sympathy for that kind of stuff. And I've seen some people, saying there, because I've seen it today, some people are going, these rich idiots. It's like, who cares if they're even rich? I don't even care if they were poor. That was just a dumb decision to make, whether you were rich or poor, to get into a shoddy submersible and go 2.5 miles underwater. That just makes no sense to me. I would never do anything like that, because I know that it would just be incredibly dangerous. It's like getting on those freaking Ride the Ducks tours. Like, almost everyone died on Ride the Ducks tours. It was just something that you didn't come back alive from. And, once the safety records of that thing was kind of publicly known, so you're taking your life in your own hands getting onto one of those things, kind of like the submersible. And considering that there was a public report made in 2018 by the NTSB saying that thing wasn't exactly seaworthy to go to those depths, is, of course, only a matter of time before that happened. And at that point, it's like everyone kind of took it into their own hands. If they end up dying down there, I'm not going to say told you so and laugh at them, but at the same time, I'm not really going to have a lot of sympathy for it, because everyone kind of knew the risks involved in going 2.5 miles under the water. But anyways, with that, hope that addresses that fairly well, in my opinion. I know that's a little harsh, but I don't really have a lot of sympathy for people doing silly things and then reaping the consequences of it. It's just like, I would just say you should have known better on that one. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is a super chat. This time from that guy once again who puts in a 5, and thank you very
Power through. Man, our stream almost went the way of that
Little lag.
submarine. But anyways, to get back to answering that, I would say I think that's a war crime, that guy, to send Louisiana mosquitoes. Alabama mosquitoes are big, but Louisiana mosquitoes are like those things from Jurassic Park. They're just terrifying, and I wouldn't have any of those around on the front lines, because as easily as they start killing Russian crews, they'd start killing Ukrainian crews too. But with that, I thank you for the support, that guy. And if it was not a war crime, I would be all for that, because that would just be funny to see a T-80 get swarmed by mosquitoes and you just hear as it just flies off into the trees. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope we did address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to George Ferguson, who says, with all the small offensives going on, do you think that Russia has any chance of success in counteroffensives?
I would say Russia doesn't really have any attempts to succeed in counteroffensives. Their last real attempt was Bakhmut, and we saw how badly that went. It was 8 months and 40,000 lives later they finally took it. I just don't think that shows that they'll be able to pull off any other successful counteroffensives in the future, because that offensive hardly even succeeded in its own right. In fact, it didn't really succeed at all due to the amount of time and the casualties they took to complete it. But, you know, they still took the town, so it's kind of counted as a semi-success, but I don't think they'll be able to conduct any more beyond that one. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Mad Machine, who says, could Ukraine drop vodka in the orc trenches about 6 hours before attacking them?
Yes. Yes. I think that would work incredibly well. They would be sloshed beyond belief. But honestly, you'd have to drop a couple of them, because they probably have a high alcohol tolerance due to literally drinking vodka out of the womb for, like, milk. So I would say you might have to drop 2 of them. But yes, I think that would help out a lot in the offensives. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Eagle, who says, Matt, do you have an update for location of the donated drone?
We actually found out from the battalion, the 231st, it is with the middleman, but they have to get some kind of paperwork. I'm asking them what kind of paperwork that is and to clarify where I possibly can get that, but they have gone quiet for the past 2 days, and I'm still waiting on them to get back with me, so that way the paperwork gets there, and then the drone's on its way. And I'll actually tell y'all where it is. It's actually in the town of Primzil right now, this town right here. It's actually there. I'm not going to say exactly where in the town, but it did make it there. So it is literally just miles from the border, and I'm trying to get the paperwork because for some reason they need one specific form that I have to send them that DHL was supposed to have made for them to be able to then transport it across the border. So that's the situation we have at the moment. It is very close to Ukraine, but it still hasn't made it all the way there. Y'all do not know how aggravating that is, because we all have known the entire story behind this drone. It was nearly a month ago that we mailed this thing off, and it was kind of unknown. Like, DHL actually said it never made it there, and then I asked the guys in the 231st, have they ever received that? And then they said, yeah, they actually did receive it. So DHL was just wrong. They actually do have the drone, and DHL just never updated the delivery status. So they still say it's in Birmingham, but it's actually here in this town, and they actually have a hold of it, but now they need another form to be able to send it over.
How much do they want?
Yeah, that's the question. But yeah, it's getting incredibly annoying. Honestly, I feel like at this point we could have actually just flown over there and flown back in maybe 2 or 3 days and have gotten it over there a lot quicker than this. It would have been a whole lot more expensive though, because like an airline ticket to Poland is like $2,000.
Or they might have pulled a plot twist on you and said, we need paperwork for you to get across.
And then I would have been like, damn it. I would have been like, we've screwed it up. But anyways.
And then it would have been like, how much?
Yeah, we would have been like, all right, how much is it? We would have just ended up going broke immediately. But anyways, with that, I hope that gives a little bit of an update. It's incredibly annoying. Kaltenberg said, don't use DHL. They were the only ones. And I asked the 231st, I was like, who could we send it through? They're like, you have to send it through DHL. And I was like, are you sure? And they were like, yes. I didn't know the DHL was going to be a nightmare, but it has been. But anyways, and also Shy404 user not found said, damn, $2,000? Yeah, it's $2,000 for an airplane ticket to Warsaw, Poland from Atlanta. And also, the drone was $2,000, and the shipping for the drone was $500. And that was the cheapest shipping that was available. this whole thing has probably been the most expensive drone shipment that has ever been to Ukraine, just for a single drone. Like either way, whether we got an airline ticket to send that thing over or whether we just mailed it through DHL, and then you would think spending $500 for shipping, they would at least update the location accurately, but then they couldn't even do that, and so we didn't even know it had actually made it to Przemysl, Poland, if that's the way it's pronounced. We didn't even know that. It says it's still in Birmingham, but we've been able to confirm with the middleman, and the 231st confirmed with the middleman, it's with them. So it's just absolute chaos right now, but we're trying to get it sorted out. And sorry to vent about that, but y'all don't know how frustrated I am because this was supposed to be something that was done and over with about a month ago. Because we filmed our part of the video and then got it mailed out a month ago, and now it's not even over there, and it's just a never-ending nightmare of dealing with DHL. But anyways, hope that does address that the best we can, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat. This one is from Neil Vizinat, who puts in a 5 and says, another funny question. If you could send any fictional army to help Ukraine, who would it be? My vote, Clone Wars, 501st.
If I could send a fictional army to Ukraine to help them win this war, let me think. Fictional armies. I don't really know of a lot of fictional armies. I would send. Damn, I don't know. Oh, gee, Batman. I never really look at fantasy armies much. Dad's army. I mean, Saxton's got a good point. Dad's army might do it. Beyond that, I wouldn't really know because I don't know of any fantasy armies. I'm gonna try and take a shot out there. I don't know. Lord of the Rings are the only fantasy armies I know. Send the tree people over there. I'm sure they would do fine. And so oh, wait a minute, Stephen Hilvers. Thank you so much for helping me out. I would send the Imperium of Man. The Death Corps of Krieg. To go over there and help them out because they would be able to get the job done, or Space Marines, one or the other, if y'all know what I'm talking about. But anyways. With that, thank you so much once again, Wheel Wisenat, for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and I hope we finally got an answer there, because like Crashin said, the Emperor protects. And so with that, hope that does address that. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Guitar Jams, who says, why no JDAM smart bombs used yet on the front lines?
I would JDAMs or smart bombs not used on the front lines. Probably because there's no aircraft that's capable of using them at the moment. We do know that we did see that Storm Shadows are being used, but we haven't seen any other advanced bombs like that, at least being used on film. We do know that we delivered some kind of a bomb upgrade package that could make them into kind of like smart bombs like that, but we've never heard of those really being used either. And so with that, I hope that answers that the best we can, maybe because they don't have capable aircraft yet. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Intersubjective, who says, if Prigozhin defects to Ukraine, should they accept him if he has useful intelligence?
Yes, I think they should. And that's kind of one of those tough things that you have to do, kind of like Operation Paperclip with the United States, where you just take people who are blatantly war criminals and then you use them for your advantage, and so then you have to end up giving them concessions so that way they'll cooperate. So I would say probably so, because Prigozhin may have important information. And really, honestly, I think that ought to be contingent on the kind of information he delivers. If he delivers important information that the Ukrainians did not know, then they should give him concessions. If he gives them information that is faulty or they already did know, then they need to go and treat him like a war criminal. So I really think it matters what he can bring to the table in that situation. And if he can't bring anything, throw the book at him. If he can, let him slide. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Value Radar, who says, if we do end up with a nuclear disaster, what do you think the likelihood of NATO military intervention against Russia becomes?
I would say that if in the event of a nuclear disaster, NATO intervention would probably be imminent at that point, due to the severity of the situation, and also Russia probably not doing anything to help out with trying to quell the problem. So I hope that answers that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Melissa Smith, commander of the LSA. Very nice name, by the way. Did you guys hear the claim that Navalny's daughter made about him losing his eyesight from bright lights in his cell 24/7? I didn't. I will have to say about that claim real quick. There's a lot worse things that could be done. That kind of sounds like maybe an overinflated claim, if I'm being straight up. That's my first impressions of it. But I'm sure that they've probably done other bad things as well.
I would say I actually haven't heard about that claim. But I wouldn't doubt that they're doing things like that to try and torture Navalny, but it does sound a little weird. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to JC the Music Man, who says, Enforcer, do you think we should be worried that China will invade the U.S., and why else would China be training in Cuba?
Oh, no. Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about China invading the U.S. They don't have the naval logistics for it. And on top of that, they would have to deal with U.S. naval bases in Guam, Hawaii, and practically everywhere else in the Pacific to create a supply chain. We could also close off the Panama Canal to them, where they have to sail around South America. And of course, some people are going, wait a minute, we don't own the Panama Canal. No, but we could. We could just go down there and be like, mine. And the Panamanians would probably be like, man, that sucks. But there wouldn't really be much to be done beyond that. Or we could just blockade the other side of the Panama Canal and not allow Chinese warships through. So it wouldn't really be possible for them to invade America. That's something that a lot of people thought because of Hollywood movies like Red Dawn, which are great movies, by the way, but completely unrealistic in the concept that a foreign country could possibly invade the United States and field a large enough military force here on the home front that they would be able to overpower us or actually give us a run for our money. Due to our geographic isolation with the rest of the world, it would practically be impossible for the Chinese, the Russians, or really any other major power that comes up in the future to actually wage a war or an invasion on the United States, unless if they were to conduct some kind of island hopping. And even then, we're quite lucky because beyond Hawaii, there's really no sizable islands in between Hawaii and the United States. So you've just got to make the Hail Mary run all the way from Hawaii to the U.S. to be able to do anything. Unlike the U.S. dealing with China, where there are loads of islands to hop around with out here near Guam. There's the Philippines, there's the Parcel Islands here in the South China Sea, and multiple other islands up in the East China Sea area. There's the Koreas, there's Japan. There's a whole lot of stuff for us to work with, but there's not really a lot for them to work with if they were to try and push across the Pacific and towards the East. So I would say that it probably wouldn't work for them. But it is still interesting here that they are training forces in Cuba. They may be doing that because it's a communist country, and, commies love to stick with each other, kind of like how fascists love to stick with each other. Commies do the same, and then later on they'll hate each other and, get into infighting and everything. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Daniel, who says, would you blow up the Kerch Bridge now, trap in the orcs, or let them leave and blow it?
Man, call me Jacqueline Pierre, because I'd be trapping them. I would blow up that bridge now. I would blow up that freaking bridge right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I'd have that thing sky high. And with that,
collapse today.
Man, that thing would be going underwater today. But with that,
it looks like the Ukrainians are probably letting them out first, from the last time we heard.
Yeah, they're letting them escape. They're letting them escape, but it won't be for long. And with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jet Fusion, who says, does the overvaluing thing maybe have something to do with the fake contest with the EU's aid, maybe?
Can you reread that one again?
Does the overvaluing thing maybe have something to do with a fake contest with EU's aid, maybe?
Maybe. I like, if that's the case, maybe the European Union is actually providing a large amount of support compared to us because our numbers are overinflated. That may be the case, because we've been trying, like, the U.S. has kind of been having a pissing contest with the Europeans. We've covered that on stream a long time ago, and kind of covered every once in a while since then. But we kind of do try and get into pissing contests with them, and they do with us. But I'm not really sure if that would tie into it. It may. There's no reason to think it wouldn't, because that could be another reason why we overinflated those numbers, and then we go back and fix them later. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Chris, who says, Matt, what new toys can Ukraine buy now with the extra $6.2 billion that we accidentally gave them?
Well, 6.2 billion. I would say they could probably buy.
10% to the small guy.
Well, you're stocking spaghetti in a spaghetti store. I gotta tell you, that spaghetti is the best. It's absolutely great. Super delicious, very nutritious. I would say that they could probably buy themselves really anything they wanted. They could buy 6 Patriot batteries with that. Put that into perspective. That's a lot. So they can really get anything. But the thing about that that support is that it isn't $6.2 billion that we just like wire over to them. It's $6.2 billion in more military support. So it's actual physical, tangible items, ammunition, vehicles, things like that. So they actually don't really get a choice in that. They just end up getting sent another $6 billion of valued equipment and materials. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Marie Joel, who says, do you think the U.S. would be ready to send some A-10s yet?
Maybe. I mean, like, maybe. But no one's really throwing out the A-10 as an option. Probably because it's not viable in this kind of war with the air defenses that are active at this point. But it may come up in the future. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ashley Fitzsimmons, who says, good day, Matt, and good day. Any news if the USN are going to send any of their retired LCAC landing craft air cushion? The U.S. would only need to provide 10 of those, and the Russian front would collapse.
We have not heard about the U.S. Navy wanting to provide the LCACs at the moment. Probably for one reason or another, we may just have them mothballed and ready to go if anything starts to happen where we need them. But we haven't heard about them possibly sending over any LCACs, sadly. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Very good question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Taylor77, who says, Enforcer, would you support giving Ukraine B-61 strategic nuclear weapons so they could provide proxy nuke Russia, with the USA maintaining plausible deniability and likely avoiding nuclear retaliation?
I would say no, because as soon as we give the Ukrainians nuclear weapons, who's to say in 20 or 30 years we regret that decision? And I always have to bring that up because the Ukrainians are great, incredible people, and they got a great, incredible government right now. But who's to say that that government does not change in 20 years, and we ended up nuclearizing a country that could end up being an adversary later on. And also, it's not really good to spread around nuclear weapons to everyone, because the more countries that have nuclear weapons, the more people are involved in that nuclear firing process, and nuclear war becomes more of a certainty just due to the unpredictability of people around the world, and there's so many people that have them, the odds of nuclear war happening somewhere would start to rise. I would say not so. I would say we definitely need to grant them guarantees that if they get nuked, we will respond to the Russians nuking them, but I don't like the idea of giving the Ukrainians nukes, largely for that reason. Also for the reason that the Ukrainians could end up wielding those nuclear weapons like a fist towards anyone, anywhere, and that could end up being a really big problem as well. Look at, I'm not saying that Ukraine is governmentally in the same position as North Korea, but look at North Korea and the rogue state it turned into after it got nuclear weapons. It wasn't that rogue before it got nuclear weapons. It went batty once it got nuclear weapons, and
they barely have them.
Yeah, they barely have them, and I just don't think it would be a good idea to give the Ukrainians any nuclear weapons, because who's to say that things just don't get out of hand really quickly, and there's no way for us to get them back, because we go, give them back, and then they go, oh, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to nuke you. Well, yeah, we have nukes. We'll just nuke Poland. And then we go, oh, well, that's great. Now we can't do anything because we can't even get the nukes back because they could just nuke us if we try and get them back. And so, it just doesn't seem like a good idea to me, in my opinion. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to James Hughes, who says, Enforcer, would you prefer the F-18 over F-16 due to runways? And I would. Some people say it's more complicated to maintain. I would still want them. They can deal with harsher runways. They can carry the same ordnance. So for that reason, it's a win-win. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one. And our next one is a question from Christian Cruz, who says, with all the crimes against humanity done by Russia, should Ukraine set up a Simon Wiesenthal Center to hunt Russians and not allow the individual soldier peace?
We could. Well, they could. That's something that you could possibly do. I hope that addresses that fairly well. Not really a lot to add to it. That is something they could do after the war to make sure that Russian war criminals don't really get any peace. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Bobo Uzella, who says, off-topic question tonight. We know China is watching the war with an electron microscope. Do China and North Korea have anything to fight about?
China and North Korea, like, is he talking about, like, in between China and North Korea? Do they have anything to fight about? Or, are they talking about just...
Yeah, they're generally, like, sort of loose allies.
kind of like besties, really. The Chinese actually have an agreement with North Korea that is a defensive pact that if North Korea gets attacked in an offensive war by the United States or South Korea, China will actually step in and defend them. And that's probably why we haven't dealt with the Koreans for decades, because we don't really want to deal with that. So they're actually pretty good friends with each other. We probably would never see a war with them. And on top of that, North Korea relies on China for food imports, and the North Koreans may be crazy, but they know not to bite the hand that feeds them. Otherwise, everyone will starve like they are right now. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and it appears we have 2 questions left in the spreadsheet. Actually, we have 3. One more just came in. And the next one goes to Rhino, who says, do you think maybe the offensive is being more conservative in hopes of gains, but also that the Kremlin will do something dumb and NATO gets involved?
I don't think the Kremlin will be doing anything dumb now where NATO gets involved, and I do think the counteroffensive is moving a lot more slowly and cautiously than anticipated, most likely trying to probe to see where the best places to attack are. Of course, the Ukrainians get a lot of satellite footage, but satellite footage is one thing. Figuring out what parts of the line are soft is a whole other thing. Kind of like how you can take an x-ray of someone's teeth, or you can poke at it with a pick, and, poking at it with a pick actually gives you a little bit of a better idea where cavities may possibly be. And that's really the same thing that the Ukrainians are doing with the probing attacks, is they're trying to figure out where the weakest parts of the line are by pushing on them a little bit and seeing how easily they give. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well, and we are on to the second to last one of the night.
And this one goes to Value Radar, who says, do you know the extent of the continued Ukrainian military buildup? If they have 9 brigades so far, are they building additional ones with troops, training, and all over NATO countries?
We do hear that they're raising more brigades, but I don't really think we have an exact number as to how many there are. So unfortunately, I have to declare ignorance on that, but we do know that they're still raising and building new brigades. That's a constant part of war, is never-ending mobilization and trying to build the army to scale, more up to size. And that's one thing we know the Ukrainians are still doing at this moment. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Sea Dog Pirate, who says, could we dust off the F-117 that was, cough, cough, retired and give them to Ukraine?
We could. It's not out of the question. They are retired. We still consider them state secrets, though, for some reason, which shows that maybe we're possibly considering using them again. But the F-117 is a great plane. It's a great bomber. It does a great job at it. It can carry 2 GBUs. It's almost completely stealth unless the bomb bay door is open, and you pretty much have to pre-prepare and know exactly where its flight path would be. It's a good plane. We could send them over. Maybe a bit of a national security risk, honestly, but considering we don't really use them anymore, I think we're trying to replace them with something else. I don't think it would be that much of a risk, really, but that's up for the Department of Defense to decide, because they may actually be planning on using these things or reactivating them in the future for one reason or another. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for a very interesting question to round out tonight's stream on. And I gotta thank everyone for watching again tonight. Tonight, we had around 6.6 thousand of y'all on live at a single time, and I gotta thank all of y'all so much once again for enjoying this stream and counting on us to cover the day's news. If y'all did enjoy it to a great degree, make sure to hit the like button. It means a lot and also helps to push out this channel to more people. Honestly, we actually found out whether you hit the like or dislike button, it doesn't really matter. It promotes it all the same as long as you just click one of the buttons, but hit the like button because we'd like to see that folks like it, and it lets us know that people did enjoy the stream. Also, make sure to subscribe, because subscribing also helps this channel, because it lets us know that people actually enjoy it. It makes us pretty happy to see that folks subscribe, and it also lets y'all know when these streams and our short war summaries run. We run short war summaries every single day of the week, 7 days a week, and we also run these streams 6 days a week, except for Mondays, and they run every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. The schedule never changes. It is always dead set in stone, and also, Bob Anon just threw in $5 and said, how long do you think the Russian economy can hold out between the slow offensive and all the smoking accidents in Russia? And to answer that question, while we're rounding this thing out, I would say the Russian economy has survived far longer than I thought it would. I think they'll probably survive another 1.5 years at the minimum, and then they'll probably go into economic collapse at that point. So I hope that answers that fairly well, Bob Anon, and thank you so much once again for that additional support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, I hope you all like, comment, and subscribe. I hope we addressed that one fairly well. And I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, LSA. Thank you for another great stream, and we'll see you tomorrow. Heroes Slava.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.